Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Policy Committee for Tuesday, April 9th. We're starting a little late. We apologize as we wrapped up a previous meeting. This is just to remind everybody that there is video and audio available on our YouTube channel. And I would like to start by with the opening prayer. Would you please join me in the sign of our faith? In the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Father, we thank you for the opportunity to gather today. May everything we do begin with your inspiration and continue with your help. We ask for your guidance throughout this meeting, that all our thoughts and actions would reflect your holy will, and that you would grant us the grace to love you and our neighbors more perfectly. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. So we're moving right along on item 2.1, the approval of the agenda. Can I have someone?
Madam Chair, can I request a change to the agenda? Under action items number 4.5, I'd like to, it's a complete rewrite of the policy. I'd like to request that it be moved to the next policy meeting. We have too many things on this agenda for discussion.
So we have a motion on the table to defer item 4.5 to the next policy meeting. Do we have a seconder? Trustee Carabella? Anybody opposed? Okay, motion is carried. Item 4.5 will be moved or deferred to the next agenda. Are there any other items? Trustee Intima.
Through you, Madam Chair. I would like to also move 4.4. The same as Trustee Duarte.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table to also defer item 4.4 on the agenda to the next policy meeting. Do we have a seconder? Trustee Duarte. And are there anybody opposed? Motion carries. I'd also like to raise one item as well. Oh, sorry, Trustee Carabella.
Okay, and I wanted to discuss that item 8.1, which is currently slated for in camera, that it be brought out of camera and into the discussion items.
Okay. I was just going to raise that, so
okay.
thank you. But so we have a motion on the table to bring item 8.1 back out from in camera onto the regular table, regular meeting. Do we have a seconder? Trustee O'Brien. Anybody opposed? Okay, so item 8.1 will be moved back onto the normal, back into the regular policy meeting, so there'll be no need for an in-camera meeting. So can we have a motion to move the agenda with the amendments? Trustee O'Brien, do we have a seconder? Trustee Duarte.
Oh, sorry.
Moving on to item 2.2, approval of the meeting minutes from February 26, 2019. Can I have a motion to accept the meeting minutes as presented? Trustee DeRosa, seconder, Trustee Duarte. Anybody opposed? Motion carried. Item number 3, declarations of conflict of interest. Being none, we'll move on to item 4.1, action items. Rescind of policy I-13, appointment of architecture. Superintendent Merrick.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, we present the appointment of architect policy. This policy originally was intended to aid in the selecting of an architect for a capital project. As you can see from the existing policy, it's a very short policy, doesn't exactly provide a whole lot of guidance. And since its inception back in 2006, or in 86 and then revised in 2006, several other things have come into place. So the broader Public Sector Procurement Act came into place back in 2012. And it forces the board to hold a competition for all services, which include architectural services. So the board, under the BPS Procurement Act, is already forced into having or running a competition for services, including architectural services. So basically, this is this appointment of architect policy has been made redundant because it's already kind of captured underneath our our BPS Procurement Act, which is incorporated into our procurement policy and procedure. So with that, I'm recommending that we rescind this policy, and then we'll fall under our current practice, which is already to follow the purchasing policy and the purchasing procedure that the board has already instated.
Thank you. So the motion reads that the Policy Committee recommends that Policy I-13, Appointment of Architect, be forwarded to the May 7th, 2019 regular meeting of the board to be rescinded. Can I have a mover?
Madam Chair, can we speak to it?
So can we have a mover? Trustee Murphy, seconder. Trustee O'Brien. We'll open for discussion. Any questions? Trustee Intabas.
Through you, Madam Chair. So, although I understand that the policy I-13 is somewhat redundant, it actually does spell out something that's significant, and that is the role of trustees, whereas the Procurement Act does give the right to the trustees to establish what the role of trustees is, and that is most specifically stated by saying Architect Selection Committee. In the Procurement Act, it's not in there. So I'd like to see I-13 stay.
Thank you, Trustee Antomasi. Is there any other questions? Trustee Carabella.
Can Superintendent Ryan speak to that Architectural Selection Committee? Oh, it's not.
Yeah, so through the chair, as Trustee Antomasi pointed out, there is an Architecture Selection Committee that we form right now, but so under the BPS Procurement Act for forced order competition, so we form a group of staff to select that committee. So our last round that we did it, we had superintendents on the committee, we had principals, we had facilities and planning staff as well. And then, so that committee comes up with the procedure to run the competition. We do an evaluation matrix, and then we put a call for proposals out to architects. They submit their proposals, we shortlisted it, we did interviews last round as well, and then selected our group of candidates from that list. That's the procedure we use right now, and I mean, even in the existing policy, there is no, requirement of trustees. It says there's an Architecture Selection Committee, which under the BPS Procurement Act, we already have a selection or an evaluation committee formed as part of that.
Trustee Intamon.
Through you, Madam Chair. So I understand that, but the point of I-13 was specifically to establish that a trustee sit on that committee. The Procurement Act does not have that stipulation in there, and anything that we vote on that comes before this board, it's in with our peruse to be able to have somebody sitting in that particular committee. So I would move to, or I would say to my fellow trustees that we keep I-13. It's not redundant. It does serve a purpose. It established that we have a role there. Otherwise, our role could be misunderstood.
Any other questions? Yeah, sorry.
Question to Superintendent Merrick. You said that we are forced into using that the act, right? Why is that? Could you elaborate more?
Yeah, through the chair. It's legislated that we follow the broader Public Sector Procurement Act. As you see from the existing policy, it says that senior staff will form a architect selection committee. There's no requirements of who was on that committee, so there is no, in our last several ones that I've been a part of, there's never been a trustee on that committee. So we're just forming a committee and a base of competent individuals that can evaluate that purchasing process and working through that. So with that said, I mean, the requirements of the BPS Procurement Act are met, and this policy here as well, but I mean, it is still redundant because there's really no involvement from trustees in that process as the policy stands right now.
Trustee O'Brien, sorry, Trustee O'Brien, then Trustee Antomasi.
Through you to Madam Chair, to Trustee Antomasi, I just want a point of clarification of the point you're trying to make. Are you telling us that Policy 1-13 stipulates that a trustee must be on that committee and that the procurement director procedure 611 doesn't. Is that what you're saying?
Through you, Madam Chair. That's somewhat correct. What I am saying is that the development criteria on how you man and make the decision through committee on the selection process is left to the board. So that's what we're supposed to be deliberating. Do we want to have a role in this? Because at the end of the day, whoever is selected, we approve. Thank you.
Secretary Daly.
That's not actually what we're asking you to deliberate right now. The policy as it stands says that there's a selection committee. The policy doesn't designate who's on the committee.
That is correct. And what I'm saying is that, so my next motion would be to include the word trustee in there on the committee itself. Thank you.
Trustee.
For process.
Trustee DeRosa.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. I would just raise a simple question. How many committees then are we opening up the door for our trustees to sit on a number of other committees? And how close do we push get to the line between operations and what our role really is?
Through you, Madam Chair.
Sorry, Trustee Antoine.
I don't want to be or sound obstinate here, but the point is we're approving the selection process. Past practice at this board has always been that trustees either sit one or two, or in the past it's actually been the whole board that sit in and decided the selection criteria and shortlisted, subsequent to staff providing input.
Sorry, for clarity, Superintendent Merritt, can you just maybe point us to policy I-25 where it's a duplicate of this, and so that we can maybe have a better understanding? Because I don't think all of us have policy I-25 in front of us. I'm not quite following because it does make reference to a selection committee, and if it's similar, then maybe that will help address some of these concerns. Sorry, Trustee Murphy, and then Secretary Daly.
Through you, Madam Chair, to clarify, Trustee Intomasi, what you're saying. So right now we're voting on rescinding a policy. Are you proposing an alteration to or creation of a different policy to insert trustees into that selection committee?
So our first step is to rescind. So what I'm saying is I don't want the policy rescinded, and as I said to Director Daly, we would come back and insert or amend the current one.
Trustee Carabello.
Maybe just from the past 4 years, we've had some schools built where the architect was thinking, like I wasn't involved in a committee, or I don't remember being called to a committee to select the architect. Can you speak to the past few schools, how it was done?
Yeah, through the chair. Previously we had, I've been here since early 2015. Since then we have never had a trustee sit on the architect selection committee. Previously or early on in my term, we had for every project that went out, we would have a call for proposals out for that particular project, and applicants would apply. We'd evaluate them individually. It was very cumbersome for the architects to continually make packages for every project. We have many, many, many capital projects, so they're constantly making packages for those projects, and we were constantly evaluating those projects as well. So it was laborious both for us and the architects. So then back in early 2017, what we did is we established a rotating list of architects. So we had our selection committee made up of staff and our business staff and academic staff, and we made a rotating roster. So we have a roster now, depending on project size. We have category A, B, and C projects. With A being would be less than $5 million, so more additions. B category projects are new elementary schools. So I think it's $5 million to $15 million. And then category C projects are over $15 million. Those are for typically new high schools, which are the only thing that would fall in the plus $15 million category. So we made a rotating roster, and now as we have projects come up in those areas, we select off that roster. Whoever's up at the top of the list in the roster, they're selected. After they're selected, they go back down to the bottom of the list. And that's the process we've been following since 2017 when we ran that competition.
Trustee DeRosa and then Secretary Daly.
Again, I'd like to reiterate whether the precedents that we might be setting in terms of getting directly involved in the operations, and where would that stop?
Thank you, Trustee DeRosa. I have policy I-25 up I'm looking at, and the last point makes reference to all board staff and trustees will ensure that the procurement of all goods and services are in compliance with all applicable board policies and procedures and all applicable federal, provincial, municipal acts and regulations pertaining to the public procurement. I'm trying to understand how the removal of this stops that policy. If you can just help me out with that, Trustee Intomasi.
There's no reference to trustees in the new policy.
But this is not a new policy. This is to rescind this policy. I-25 still exists, and there is reference to trustees.
So I'm talking about the Procurement Act. So within the Procurement Act, there's no reference to trustees. So what I'm asking my fellow trustees is that we want to have a role in it, because at the end of the day, we do appropriate the money. And if we're going to be appropriating the money, then we should get a short list for us to approve, albeit staff has the right to give us insight into how the pricing went. But because we are approving it, we should have a role in it. Thanks.
Superintendent Merrick, sorry.
Through the chair, just to add, so under our purchasing policy, beneath that we have our Administrative Procedure on Purchasing, which is VI-11. So in Section 6, under Consulting Services, anything $100,000 or more is for open competition, so an RFP or an RFT, and then follows through a purchase order. So that's what we're falling under with this process.
Secretary Daly, and then Trustee Murphy.
Maybe this is, I was just going to ask Superintendent Merrick, under the current procedure or the policy, how many schools have we built using this selection committee that we've?
Say 5 to 8, somewhere in there. I don't know. It's probably more than 5, less than 10.
Trustee Murphy?
Just if I can offer my opinion, I understand what Trustee Intomasi is trying to achieve. From my experience in the construction industry, the design and building of schools is a niche, specialized section of the construction industry. There isn't a broad range of architects who have the capability of designing and building these schools, and there aren't a large stable of general contractors who have specialized in the construction of schools. Honestly, with all due respect to my fellow trustees, I don't think we have the knowledge to evaluate an architect's ability correctly, and I don't think we would be adding value to the process. I think we would be stifling the process and muddying the waters, in my opinion.
Trustee Duarte, and then Trustee Charlotte.
Chair, question to Secretary Daly. From your past experiences with different school boards, are trustees involved with this process? First question. And and what if a trustee wants to attend any of those selection committee meetings? Are they allowed to? Are they welcome, or what?
Secretary.
So to the first part, I've only worked in 2 boards, this one and the one I worked with recently. We were not building anything in that board, so I couldn't speak confidently to the architect selection procedure in that board. We were closing, not building. To the second point, staff working committees are really for staff to work.
Trustee Charlevoix, you had, oh, sorry, I'm sorry, Trustee DeRosa.
Yeah, I'd like to echo Secretary Daly's point that these are staff committees. They work out the details of it, and eventually the projects end up in this room for the board to approve anyways. So this is a matter of how much detail is justified and how much encroachment into the operations this board wants to do. My personal view, frankly, is that we have an oversight role. We do approve the money at the end of the day through explanations through the responsible superintendents, and I think that's what our real role should be contained to. Because we don't have, again, to reiterate Trustee Murphy's point, we don't have the expertise to add value to those discussions anyways.
Trustee Intomas.
So the purpose is not to encroach on the role of senior staff. The purpose is for transparency. And as Trustee Murphy has stated, he's absolutely right. There are only certain firms that can respond to the call of these particular tenders. But even within that scope, there's 10 or 11 that are qualified to do so, and staff regularly gets proposals from all these people. I think it's incumbent on us to make it transparent, and in order to make it transparent, we need to sit there and take a look at it. Staff should be coming to us and saying, look, here's how many respondents we have. We've shortlisted it to 3, and it's incumbent on us to see that the process is fair and equitable, as such transparent. That's the purpose why I want I-13 and I-25 to stay.
Trustee Dwyer.
Madam Chair, you just read that I-25 talks about trustees make...
Do you need a minute?
Oh. Okay, sorry about that. You just spoke about I-25 requiring trustees to oversee and make sure that things are transparent and all this stuff. How do trustees know that things are transparent when they have not been involved with the architectural process? So, how do you expect the trustees to know about the process when they are not involved with it? And we are just supposed to approve that, right?
I was just reading off simply out of the policy to try to recognize what was, because they had made reference to policy I-25, so that was the point. I think if everybody's satisfied, I think we can actually take this to a vote unless there's any other comments or opposed comments in regards to this policy. Anything else?
I move that trustee.
Okay, so we'll go to a recorded vote. We'll start with Trustee O'Brien. Sorry, I'll reread the motion. So the motion was that the Policy Committee recommends that Policy I-13, Appointment of Architect, be reported to the May 7, 2019 regular meeting of the Board to be rescinded. So, Trustee O'Brien.
Approved. In favor.
Trustee Antomasi.
Against.
Trustee Carabell.
I'm against.
Trustee Murphy.
In favor.
Trustee Chernota. Trustee Charlevoix.
In favor.
Trustee Duarte.
In favor.
Trustee DeRosa. That's 2 opposed and the remainder in favor, so the motion passes. So now we'll move on to 4.2, Policy I-43, Use of Technology and Digital Citizenship. Superintendent Percassin.
Through you, Madam Chair. The purpose of this policy is for the consideration of the Policy Committee revisions to Policy I-43 as recommended by staff. The policy has been streamlined so that the guiding principles for use of technology and digital citizenship are concisely and clearly delineated. Administrative Procedure VI 62, Use of Technology and Digital Citizenship, has been developed to outline the implementation of the principles ensconced in Policy I-43. The revised policy is before you, attached for your review and consideration.
Thank you. So I'll read the motion. That the Policy Committee recommends that Policy I-43, Use of Technology and Digital Citizenship, be forwarded along with amendments to the April 16th, 2019 regular board meeting for approval. Can I have a mover? Trustee Duarte. Seconder? Trustee Murphy. Any questions? Trustee Carabella.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. I do have some questions. So I really appreciate how everything that was cut out, we got a fresh copy without all the red lines, because it was hard to keep track, so I really appreciated having that to compare. I've had I sent a letter that I received from a parent that had some concerns. So I wanted to see, and I wanted to know if there was any I didn't see anything about parental consent for the use of technology, especially at the elementary, in the elementary level. I wanted to know if you wanted to speak to that. We had this at a policy meeting in November and brought up those issues in particular. So could you speak to that?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. We do cover the issue of consent along with our permission form for apps with the procedure VI 62 that is up for discussion soon.
Trustee Carabella?
I did see that as a follow-up. That was amazing. And so that's for the particular apps. But this parent was in particular concerned about the emails that children are allowed to have or that are set up at the beginning of the year. And her child was in grade 1. And so there should be maybe some, I would propose a consent form for an active consent form to parents maybe annually acknowledging their child has an email account set up, something like that.
Secretary Daly.
Through you, Madam Chair. So in the student information sheet that students and parents fill out each year, both at elementary and secondary, we have included a section as part of the board's commitment to 21st century learning. Students with the supervision of the classroom teacher will be using ministry and board-approved tools in the classroom, and that's outlined in the next procedure. Within these environments, student may use wikis, blogs, podcasts, and then there's a list. The board supported are the following tools: G Suite for Education, D2L or Desire to Learn, Microsoft Office 365, My Blueprint, and School Messenger. And then the next bullet, students will be provided with an HCDSB email account in accordance with board guidelines. So parents are made aware of that in the information that goes out to them in the fall, both elementary and secondary.
Can I make a comment? Sorry, through you, Madam Chair.
Absolutely.
I'm the privacy officer for the board, if you remember Sandra Vieira. We need to be cognizant that it's not consent. We're doing this as a consistent purpose of education, and we only require to notify parents of what we're doing. So that's why we're providing the notice of collection, use, and disclosure in the policy privacy procedure, as well as part of the family information consent form that goes home annually. And we also have a board website that is going to talk a little bit more about 21st century learning in our board and what that looks like. So it's a notice piece, it's not a consent piece.
Thank you. Any other questions? Sorry, Trustee Charlotte.
So I just have a quick question. Perhaps Director Daly can answer it a little better. Throughout the entire policy, it does say, use of technology with staff permission, things like that. So I've noticed in the last, actually 2 years, the transfer from paper to digital. You've noticed, like I use an iPad and things like that. So I haven't noticed any staff kickback saying, no, you can't use it. But in the case that you were, how would we proceed by saying, this student is using, a tablet to write their own notes? it's the same as paper, yet it's to the discretion of the teacher. So how would that proceed in, say, the so-called situation that a staff member was not okay with a student using an iPad in this situation to take down their classroom notes and write their formulas, things like that?
I'm not sure why a teacher wouldn't be okay with it. I'm not sure what the question is, Trustee Charlebois. Sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah. So, because we require staff permission to use all our technology, and almost all staff have acknowledged that that's totally fine, and we use it accordingly. Though, I mean, I understand that my use of, say, an iPad can actually open me up to a whole new slew of access to resources that other students wouldn't have. Whether it's, if I were to say, using this during some sort of an assessment, how do we proceed in the situation that as we modernize and our students transfer over to completely digital, that all their needs are still met without any kickback in the case that there was?
Okay, again, I'm not sure if you're talking about or if the question is about a specific teacher that's going to say, I don't want you using an iPad, or a specific, if that's what the question is, I think in those, what would be limited one-off situations, it'd be dealt with at the school level. I guess I'm not understanding exactly what you're getting at.
All I'm trying to get at is, our policy is based off a teacher saying yes, though, what happens, sometimes things don't go as planned. Basically, the policy is saying that the teacher has the discretion to so-called remove a student's access to technology to benefit their own learning. So what would be the procedure in the rare occurrence that this would come along? How would we proceed in a situation like that?
Okay. Again, maybe you could point me to the part of the policy that the teacher has that discretion. The teacher has, in fact, the duty to ensure that students are responsibly using any type of technology or social media in the class. That's what we have to have them do. Not that the changes in the government policy will necessarily make a big change to our practice, but essentially what it says is use of technology in the classrooms for educational purposes. That's really what a teacher should be, if we're going to use the term monitoring whether or not I'm using it to take notes or whether I'm using it to look at Snapchat. Is that what people do with Snapchat? Look at it? Instagram, is that me?
I think that's what Marvin's trying to do right now. So, is there any other questions, Trustee Garabella?
Thank you. So, through you, Madam Chair. So, I still have a concern about that just being information item for parents. I think that for the many things that parents are asked to consent on, pizza or field trips, this is something that a child having this in grade 1 having an email account where they can have full access to send and receive emails from outside the school domain, and then the applications that they're able to use or get familiar with. I think that it's not a big thing to ask parents, and then they're aware that their child has an email account. They're aware of the apps and the Office 365 or whatever they're going to use, and what that gives the child access to, and also gives a third party access to the child, are things that are important that parents want in today's, especially with the technology just going full steam ahead.
So can I just, before you answer that, because my part of the question is parents always still have the right to refuse and put in writing to say that they don't want this once it's disclosed.
With all those notice statements that we put into that procedure, as well as that family information consent form, the parent can have that conversation with the school principal, and alternatives can be provided if we can do that here at the board level. So there is that option to opt out of having those things. Per se, an email account for your child. If that's not what you're comfortable with, then you can opt out of that with a conversation with your school principal.
Trustee.
And where is that option given to parents?
It is stated at the bottom of the form.
And so can we then just put that into the policy that parents, I was going to say something like at the introduction of technology and annually in elementary schools, parents will have to give active consent to usage of technology for their child, its scope and access, so they have the opportunity to confirm, renew, or change access for their minor child and be informed of current technology being used.
Sorry, Secretary Daly. Go ahead.
Again, it's not a consent-based piece of legislation. It's a consistent purpose of education, so we only provide notice. They have the option to opt out, which is something that they choose to do as a parent, but again, it's not a consent piece that is offered under MFIPA. We're providing notice to parents, and that's pretty clear under that piece of legislation that as a board, we have the right to determine what textbooks we're using, what educational tools we're providing to the student. That's beyond a consent piece, if that's clear.
First, we'll do Trustee O'Brien, Trustee Duart, and then back to Trustee Carabella.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To Trustee Carabella, so are you, even though it is in legislation, what you're asking for is that it be included in policy as well? Is that what you're asking?
I'm asking that there would be some kind of parental consent clause or some kind of parental consent statement that gives the parents the final say, the consent for technology for their child. I think it's to do the other way around, the opting out. It's not the same as, many people might not notice that, it's not the same as actively saying, oh yeah, okay, my grade 1 is being given an email address. And parents give consent to pizza. I don't understand why it's so difficult to give consent, and maybe if technology-wise they can give consent through the emails instead of paper, but something that gives the parents clearly that your child has an email. She only found out her grade 1 child has an email from her older child, I think.
Trustee Carabella, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I'm going to pass it over to Trustee Duart and Secretary Daly, just because we'll circle back to you, okay? Trustee Duart.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to know from Director Daly, do we have data of how many parents have opted out of this program? Do we collect that kind of data? Just curious to know that.
I don't believe we've collected that data. I think, sorry, Superintendent Kroll.
Sorry, just from my experience in the school that I was at for the last 3 years, we didn't have any parents opt out. So the elementary school, so about 700 parents or families didn't have any opt out.
Secretary Daly.
And just to clarify as well, with all due respect, parents do not consent to pizza. Parents decide whether they want to purchase pizza or wraps or whatever. They don't consent to the textbook being used in the classroom either. We're using technology in order to provide a 21st century, or hopefully to provide the skills and competencies students will need now and in the future. We do it with thought. We don't open it up to anything. We do use both ministry and board approved applications. When we look at the procedure later on around additional apps, ones that teachers may come across, there is a different procedure for that. But we're trying to give students the tools that we feel as educators that they need. We're letting parents know that.
So I think we can, unless you have anything further than what you've already added, I think at this point we can probably go to a recorded vote. Do you have any further information other than what you've already provided, Trustee Carabella?
Okay, well, I'd like to make a proposal for an amendment for that, and then we can have vote on that or not. So,
okay.
So I'd like to propose an amendment that parents, you have to help me with the technology wording, but basically that parents would give active consent annually and at the beginning of the school year in elementary school to the technology and emails, accounts, or anything created like that for their children.
Do we have a seconder? Trustee O'Brien? Shall we have a discussion on this? Trustee Chernoff?
I'll weigh in on this topic. I just think that listening to everyone speak around, I think I have respect for parents that don't want their children on the email, but I think it's better to opt out because the numbers are so low as opposed to having all the parents sign a consent. I just think logistically have them opt out as opposed to having every parent sign consent because it's noticed, just like they were talking about, we don't ask for consent on textbooks.
Thank you. Trustee Charlevoix, then Trustee Duart, and then Trustee O'Brien.
I agree with what Secretary Daly had said is, we have adapted to using modern technology as a form of education, and I do definitely understand giving a grade 1 student an email, given that the fact that they actually couldn't necessarily get one on their own outside of our board emails. I believe the age of consent is usually 13 to usually sign up for emails or social media now, things like that. However, the email alone gives the student access to Google Drive, to Microsoft 365. So I understand the basis of the email being, a possible worry for parents, but at the same time, that email is the sole thing that gives them access to all the technological resources the board provides. And if you were to actually take that away from a student, you're taking away their benefit to actually learn through technology.
Trustee Duart?
Madam Chair, I'm just trying to understand Trustee Carabella's question. One thing which I'm afraid of is the kids whose parents take them out of the program. They will be losing out on things in today's day and time. Today's day and time, technology is the only way out as far as getting information. And if the kid can send emails, the kid would be a smart kid because I sent emails at a very late age. So I don't think that we should prevent or keep ourselves back from moving forward. I think we should embrace things and go with the technology because that's the only way forward.
Trustee O'Brien.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. We do ask for consent on some things. We do ask for consent on trips, places or things where there is some element of risk. With email, there is a risk. I believe that if you ask for consent, at least you're red flagging to the parent that there is a risk with your child having an email. Textbooks, there really isn't that much risk, or pizza, hopefully. But I think in this one, it is a pain. I'm being a teacher for 27 years, but a one-off at the beginning of the year consent form for the entire year, I know it would be cumbersome, but I think if you drove the point home, like Trustee Duarte did, that's an important thing. At least you're red flagging to the parents the child has an email, and they know that, and they may supervise that more diligently. Thank you.
So can we have a vote on the proposed amendment as the motion was made by Trustee Carabella for the addition to give active consent annually for the parents for the children in elementary school to participate in technology/emails? So we'll go to a recorded vote, and I'm sure Janine did a wonderful job of actually getting it down. So we'll start with you, Trustee O'Brien. It's in regards to the amendment that Trustee Carabella made, which is an addition to this policy, which requires active consent annually from the parents for the elementary children to participate in or to be allowed to have an email address assigned to them.
In favor.
Thank you. Trustee Intomasi?
In favor.
Trustee Carabella?
In favor.
Trustee Murphy?
Opposed?
Trustee Chernota? Trustee Charlevoix?
Opposed.
Trustee Duarte?
Opposed.
Trustee DeRosa?
Opposed.
So if my math is correct, there's 4 opposed, 3 in favor. The motion and the amendment does not pass. We'll go back to the original motion, which I will read again, is that the Policy Committee recommends that Policy I-43, Use of Technology and Digital Citizenship, be forwarded along with amendments to the original amendments to the April 16, 2019 regular board meeting for approval. I will start with Trustee O'Brien.
Opposed.
Trustee Intomasi.
Opposed.
Trustee Carabella.
Opposed.
Trustee Murphy.
In favor.
Trustee Ternata. Trustee Charlevoix.
In favor.
Trustee Duarte.
In favor.
Trustee DeRosa.
In favor.
The motion passes. Thank you. So moving on to item 4.3, policy II-07, the school day teaching day, elementary and secondary. Superintendent Percassen, you're up again.
Thank you. Policy II-07, the school day daily sessions, elementary and secondary, is a long-standing policy that was written in compliance with the regulations of the Education Act in the province of Ontario. This policy was last reviewed in February 2016. Minor amendments and additions to the policy are suggested. The associated policies and procedures were updated to include inclement weather procedures, and the revised policy II-07, the school day daily sessions, is attached for review and consideration by the policy committee.
Thank you. So the motion is that the policy committee recommends that policy II-07, the school day daily sessions, elementary and secondary, be forwarded along with amendments to the April 16, 2019 regular board meeting for approval. May I have a mover? Trustee Murphy, seconded by Trustee O'Brien. Discussions? Trustee O'Brien.
Thank you to Madam Chair, Secretary Daly. Our co-terminus board has 2 nutrition breaks as opposed to a lunch and 2 recesses. I know one reason to do this is because as one less transition for younger students in the day, making more effective use of time. After having used that system for quite a few years, I found it was quite good for timetabling as well. Have you ever considered this for Halton Catholic?
Secretary Daly.
I haven't considered it this year. I'm not sure if it's been considered in the past. I see Superintendent Cipriano.
Through you, Madam Chair. Our former director, Paula Dawson, asked myself to explore the possibility of the balanced school day. I believe in 2015, we did speak. We explored with a team of elementary principals of 4 principals. We visited a few sites in the Wellington Catholic District School Board that practices the balanced school day. We did have conversations at our senior table about the possibilities. Some of the challenges that existed at that time is that to split the day up into 3 equal sessions would require a possible change to our collective bargaining agreements in our elementary unit, because our FSL delivery model is in 40-minute blocks, and the balanced day wouldn't split up evenly into 40-minute blocks as they do now in 7 periods. There was some talk about some challenges not challenges, but the communication plan, if we would explore it. At that time, our director, Paula Dawson, decided that we would put that on hold, and we'd consider it at a future date that was undetermined at the time.
Trustee O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair, to Superintendent Cipriano. You mentioned the challenges. Did you see any advantages?
Most definitely. Some of the advantages, again, that the schools that we visited shared with us was the ability to have larger blocks of time for literacy and numeracy, uninterrupted, recognizing that the little ones in elementary school, kindergarten to possibly grade 4 and possibly grade 4 and 5, take extra time during the winter months, being in Canada. That's about 6 of the months that children are in school, they're wearing coats and mitts, and so that adds more time to entering and exiting schools. So that by eliminating one of those times, and for those around the table just to know the difference, currently our current model, which is fairly consistent around the province, is we have 2 15-minute breaks, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, and then a 1 hour, 60-minute break. The balance day breaks that same amount of break time into 2 periods, one 40-minute late morning break and one 50-minute early afternoon break. So that 90 minutes, it cuts down on the number of breaks, again, trying to find efficiencies in keeping kids together and not wasting that time of coming inside of school, outside of school, getting dressed. Another one of the challenges is we explored it at a time when the ministry at the time put a cap on supervision minutes. Sorry, as I'm speaking, it's coming back to me. I wasn't prepared for this. And elementary teachers currently have a cap on supervision of 80 minutes a week. And again, our current model allows us a little bit more flexibility. That model, another one of the challenges was it doesn't provide the same flexibility in providing principals to split up supervision in smaller chunks to get closer to that 80 minutes.
Trustee Carabell.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. So this policy, it refers to the inclement weather, and what I wanted to ask was, am I correct? It talks about inclement weather on this one. So with what happened this year was with all the snow days, I heard some complaints from parents, like how do children catch up the time they've lost, not to change the process of choosing an implement day, but is there a way that children catch up so that they have the ministry requirements met by the end of the year? Or was that significant enough, the 4 snow days, to impact that or not?
Through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I think any time out of the classroom is significant. So whether it's a day or 4 days or 10 or 15 or 20, which is becoming quite common with many students around attendance. There's certainly no ministry mandate to say it's a 1-for-1. If you miss a day, you need to make a day up. I think that would be, we would encourage teachers to use their judgment in terms of how they might make up time. Certainly at older grades, it's a little bit different. For teachers that do use some technology in their classrooms, whether it's through D2L or something else, students could deemably kind of stay on track online to a certain extent, not the same as a face-to-face sort of environment. But yeah, it's concerning. It was certainly concerning at our secondary schools because the days were all kind of, it seemed, jammed together right at the beginning of the semester as you're starting the semester. I don't know if there's a magic number to say once we hit 5 or 6, do we have to now think of a different way to make up time? I'm hopeful that this year was an outlier.
Trustee Charlotte.
So I know that when, I'm not sure, I don't think from my recollection of 4 years ago, we never really got course outlines in elementary school, but I know in high school we're actually given a breakdown of even the amount of classes allotted to every unit, things like that. And I know that this year, though we did have, I think it was 4 snow days in the second semester, I found that all of my teachers actually dealt with it very, very well. We lost maybe a few review days here and there. We might have had to push a few lessons together, but with the amount of days missed, I think that the staff handled it amazingly well, even to the point where I never actually felt pressured to go further or catch up on anything. So I think that a lot of the staff have probably prepared, they have their lessons prepared for the entire semester or the entire year for elementary, and are probably pretty ready to miss a few days, because I definitely noticed that even though we missed the days, that it didn't really affect our classes.
Okay, so we'll go back to the main motion. I'll read it again. That the Policy Committee recommends that Policy II-07, the school day daily sessions, elementary and secondary, be forwarded along with amendments to the April 16, 2019 regular board meeting for approval. We'll go to a vote. Trustee O'Brien?
Approved. I'm sorry. In favor.
Trustee Intavasi?
In favor.
Trustee Garofalo?
In favor.
Trustee Murphy.
In favor.
Trustee DeRosa.
In favor.
Trustee Duarte.
In favor.
Trustee Sharp.
In favor.
Trustee Giornota. Motion passes. That is it for our action items. Now we're going into 5.1, which is discussion items. We've got a new policy, V-18, community engagement and public consultation. We've got Ms. Swindon and Secretary Daly. I'm assuming, Andrew, you're speaking to it?
Thank you. And through you, Madam Chair. Tonight, trustees have before you a newly proposed draft of a policy on community engagement and public consultation. As a board, we are committed to enhancing our ongoing communication with parents, students, staff, and members of the broader community. And this commitment is outlined in our strategic plan as a system priority to ensure that communication is clear, transparent, and responsive to our stakeholders. A policy has been drafted to ensure consistency in the provision of effective and meaningful consultation with our community. So just to provide you with an overview, it's not very long, it's 3 pages, but it's broken down into a couple of areas. The framework for the community engagement is based on the work of IAP2, which is the International Association for Public Participation. They are the leading international experts on best practices for public engagement. And the policy refers to the levels of engagement, which we've adopted for our purposes. In the appendix, you'll see the diagram and the chart. We've adopted from IAP2, with the 4 levels being inform, consult, involve, and collaborate. The requirements in the policy are broken down into 2 main areas. The first section referring to sharing of information with stakeholders. The main points here are around relaying timely and accurate information about changes to policies, programs, legislation, decisions, or issues that require attention. The second section refers specifically to engaging stakeholders in public consultation. So this section outlines the process that will be consistent for undertaking a consultation. The main points you will notice is that all public consultations will include a plan, which we are, staff are already doing this, but we're just not sharing it publicly. The draft policy makes a commitment to share the plan, which includes the purpose and the goals and the target audiences, the level of engagement, the communication strategies, the methodologies, and timelines. We would be sharing that by posting it online. All active public consultations will be posted on a designated page on our website. So that's a major change that we are recommending in this policy. The appendix provides, at the last page, an explanation of the levels of engagement, along with some examples at each level. And then the matrix that you see at the bottom is really will only be used by staff, but that's an example of what it will look like when we're posting for a stakeholder for whatever the consultation happens to be. We will list the affected audiences and what level of consultation or level of engagement we will be using. So we just wanted this to be as transparent as possible to build trust, but also I think it will help us to manage expectations with our audiences. And the draft policy is before trustees for review and discussion, and we would welcome any questions or feedback.
Thank you. So I guess there's no real motion on the table. So is there any comments, concerns, questions? Trustee Giornota? Trustee Duarte?
Madam Chair, we talk about public consultation process. Question to Secretary Daly. Is this moving of French program, is that going to be considered as part of the public consultation process? Is that a good example or a bad example?
There's only examples. My good examples are bad examples. Well, I think it really comes down to the difference to when people hear consult, what they think that means. So consult means you're getting feedback, you're looking for options, but then ultimately you are going to make a decision. I think with regards to the extended French program changes that we had proposed back in the fall, we would have been, at the time, informing people of the changes, letting them know up front. I didn't do a good job of that. So part of where this, the move to kind of get this dealt with or get it started this year was partially in response to that.
Trustee Carabella.
Through you, Madam Chair. So I like a lot of this policy, and I'm just going to propose for on the same aspect of consult. So gathering feedback from stakeholders to determine the reaction in order to refine policy or directions. I was wondering if it would be, I find the word reaction, I don't know if we're just trying to see how they're reacting, or do we want to get feedback? So I'm thinking gathering input from stakeholders to determine their feedback in order to refine policy, or to determine their, yeah. I think that.
Which section are you on?
So it's on definitions under consult.
You know what, we can change that. That's pulled from IAP2 language,
okay.
But you know what, let's change it because I think I agree with you that react is, it can have a different connotation.
Yeah.
So I think maybe to gather feedback I think all you need is to gather feedback from stakeholders in order to refine policy and directions.
Oh, even better, yeah.
Trustee DeRosa.
Just a comment. I'd like to commend you for laying this out as clearly as it is. It's quite very well laid out, easy to understand.
I share those sentiments. It's a great policy. Thank you very much for working on that. Is there any other comments or questions? Okay, so we'll move on to 5.2, transportation for specialized programs, and that would be me. So I apologize for, I was absent at the last meeting so that we could have a discussion about this, but one of the things that came out of the motion was talking about a couple of pieces in regards to this transportation piece. And it's not to hinder anybody, but really the piece that we're looking at is if we could, my ask is, and I'm hoping that there's support in this, is that we have the staff go back and look at it from an equity position. Also, if we're meeting the ministry requirements regarding gifted students' needs, so we're going to need obviously some feedback from Superintendent Cipriano particularly. And then there's the finance piece part of it, which is, does it fit in our budget? We know that the motion had been passed and it was specific for gifted students, but I think that there's a couple of moving pieces into this that we need to look at as a whole. If we're going to start offering transportation for specialized programs, we need to make sure that we're looking at it from all angles. So I'm asking that we ask staff that we put it together, and that whatever comes out of it, and possibly the development of a policy that deals with transportation for specialized programs. Any thoughts, comments? Trustee O'Brien.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Please correct, this is out to the trustees, please correct me if I am wrong, but there is no policy on gifted programming, not that I could see. I wonder if that is the problem. I wonder if a policy on gifted programming itself might be a good starting point in this discussion, because it seems that it's been going for a while. There's a lot of input. I just like to put that thought out and see what the rest of you think. Thank you.
Superintendent Cipriano, can you maybe...
Sure, through you, Madam Chair. We do not have a policy currently on gifted programming. We have a special education plan that outlines all special education programs in the system, everything from placements to programs to where they're located in our system, how they're, again, off the top of my head, the numbers of students that are expected to be in each class. That's where you would find information around gifted programming per se. Again, we don't currently have a gifted program policy.
Sorry, Trustee O'Brien?
Thank you. And I'm wondering if a policy might kind of give us more of a foundation to build that on. I'm sure it's in the plan, but a policy might give us something that we can actually build our decisions on. Thank you.
So I'm going to go back to the discussion item, which is specifically dealing with the transportation piece in regards to it. I think that that's maybe something that we can talk about, or actually even bring back to SEAC. I think because we have to look at it as SEAC deals with all special needs and special education. But this specifically is to talk about the transportation piece, and do we meet, are we being equitable in it? Are we meeting ministry guidelines in meeting the needs for our gifted children by offering this transportation piece? And then there's that third piece, which is will it fall in line with our budget? I know we've had a lot of delegation, and we know that there was a cost that was presented back in November. That may have changed now, given the situation that we're in with this current government. But that being said, I think these are important pieces that and I'm hoping that we can have a discussion about this, is that we can ask staff to come back with us, and if we meet that, then look at some sort of development of a policy that talks about transportation to specialized programs. It's not, and it would encompass all specialized programs, right? And it wouldn't be just specifically for one group. But like if AP is a specialized program, then what would transportation look like for that? And does it meet all of our needs and all of the students' needs, right? Trustee Duarte?
Madam Chair, I'm wondering if we have any update on the Vision for Student Transportation Ontario. Have we heard back? Is there any information on that?
Secretary Daly?
No.
Trustee Antomasi, then Trustee.
So I have a couple of logistical problems. So we have a passed motion, which was passed back in November. Then we've since put 4 other amendments to that particular motion. So what are we looking at? Are we looking at the first motion? Because I can tell you right now, from the second amendment, we actually activated the first motion, which means we cannot rescind it. So my question to this group is, do we need to do some things to get rid of some of those motions before we can move forward?
So, sorry, just to answer that, I think this isn't where we would do that. That would actually have to be done in a regular board meeting. So we had deferred that to here. So right now we have to figure out what happens with policy in the development, if there is a need to have a development of a policy for it. So that's why it's on as a discussion item right now, is to figure out how we move forward. And I think we start with those few pieces, which is,
But at this particular juncture, we can't move forward because there are amendments that are contingent about certain things happening. 1, division. 2, whether it's equitable. And 3, whether we can afford it. So my question again to the board is, how do we move forward?
Trustee Murphy?
I'd like to offer opinion, which is just an opinion. I agree with Madam Chair. We need information, and I understand Trustee Intomasi's structural issues, but we still need the information. So I agree that I think we need to proceed and ask staff for those reports, and then we can do our plumbing work afterwards, in my opinion.
Trustee Carabello.
Trustee Intomasi.
Sorry, Trustee Murphy. Trustee
Thank
Carabello.
you. Through you, Madam Chair. So a letter came in just before us, very late, but I just looked at it, and there were some figures there that are interesting, that the amount of students we lose also going to somewhere else, and the cost associated with that could be interesting for staff to see as well, or how valid are those.
Trustee Intomasi.
Follow-up question. So does the ministry have a policy currently on gifted? Period.
Secretary Daly.
Well, any exceptionality falls under special education and their special education. So to say, is there a gifted policy, that wouldn't be accurate. Do we have a mandate through the ministry to provide appropriate programming for students with that designation? Yes. Are we required to do that? Absolutely. Yes.
So that's already. So we've established that. So maybe we should move forward and establish a policy so that we can deal with the second portion of it. So we would first recognize, and then we would add to that the component which deals with busing.
And I think that's how I've kind of tried to say it is to talk about it. And then if we're looking at transportation, it would have to be a generic. It wouldn't be specific to gifted. It would have to be for everything that's encompassed in that, and how it's dealt with and how it falls in. And that's why the equity piece and having the staff report on it, and also making sure that we're meeting the ministry requirements, all those moving pieces. If we have all of those checks in place, then we can form a policy. We can't form a policy without having that information first. So I think that that's an important step, first and foremost, and it's actually a responsible step to make sure that we're not putting something in place and then backtracking to fix it after the fact. It's better to do it right from the get-go. So I'm not sure, because I'm actually chairing this right now, if I actually have to sit down and hand my gavel over to somebody to say that we ask that we ask staff to come back and report this. Maybe Secretary Daly, you can help guide this at this point. Sorry. Trustee Carabella.
I don't have an answer to your question, but just the equity issue. I know one of the, the frame that I saw it in to put forward that motion is that looking at the gifted students, that there's equity for them, and that the ones that were in the boundaries of an AP program were able to partake in that if they got in, which they had the same criteria to get in, and the gifted students that were outside the AP bus program to be bused, so they didn't have that option. So I saw that as less equity among the gifted students. Not so much, I think, the equity issue that I'm hearing from is that then we should provide busing to all students of AP to make it equitable. So I'm just saying that mine was the equity among the gifted students, and as a first step, because having busing would be great for everybody, but as a first step, and because they have needs and that are identified.
Trustee Anton.
So, in order to move forward, have we done a study on whether it's equitable? So we've costed it. We don't have the vision from the ministry. We don't know when it's going to be forthcoming. And relating it back to the budget, moving forward for 2019-2020, we don't know how we're going to be hit with a budget. And we're already running a shortfall. It would seem to me that we need to go back to the original motion before we can do anything, and then remove the contingencies. And once we remove the contingencies, I think we can start to move forward on whether or not we're going to do a policy and whether we can implement. Again, I'll go back to what I said originally. We've technically already activated the motion that was passed November the 18th. As such, the only thing we can do is rescind it on the basis of affordability and the lack of funds that are coming down from the ministry. And they're all ifs. So I think we're at a stalemate now. I don't think we can do anything.
So Trustee Ian Tomasi, is that you making a motion that we refer it back to the board?
I'm making a motion that we need to remove the amendments to the amendment to the amendment. That's what my motion would be.
So then so we need to bring it back to the regular board meeting. So then my question to you is are you bringing a motion forward to refer this back to the regular board meeting?
So yes, but it has to be specific, right? So let's make it specific so that we are going to remove the contingencies, which would be
sorry, point of order. That's not, we wouldn't do that here. It would have to be done, that specific piece of it would have to be back on the agenda at the board meeting.
So the basis of my amendment would be to bring it back to the board for deliberation, contingent about getting answers to those questions. We can do that.
So do the answers to the questions first?
Yes.
Okay, so
We need to
ask staff to, okay. So we'll go back to my original question, which was, can we ask staff if we can do a piece on the equity, whether it falls in line with, in that it's equitable, if we're within guidelines with the ministry requirements for gifted programming, and that we're meeting their needs, and then the last piece, which is the funding piece. So if we can ask that the staff report back on that, for I think next board meeting might be a little tight in regards to that, but the May meeting, the May meeting, would that be doable, Secretary Daly, do you think? I'm looking at your staff, and they're not all here, and sorry, pardon? To go to to next board meeting. Okay. Sorry, Trustee O'Brien, and then Trustee Intomasi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just for clarification, you said meeting the needs, okay? Do you mean meeting the needs of the gifted?
I'm making reference to the ministry requirements in regards to gifted children, yes.
Okay. Can you just make sure that's in the request? I think that's the way you just read.
Absolutely, that's in specific in regards to meeting the ministry requirements. Sorry, I'm just gonna, so it was Trustee Intomasi, Trustee DeRosa, and then Trustee.
So we also have another motion to remove moving forward, and that is the hold motion, which holds the original motion. That has to be dealt with.
Just to answer that.
Otherwise, we can't move forward.
Yeah, that would be dealt with at the board meeting. That's not dealt with at policy. So, yeah, no, for sure. Trustee DeRosa.
In hearing the back and forth, I can't help wondering, does this lead us back to actually solving the problem or dealing with the issue with the information that was required back then when we delayed it on the basis of information needed? Because from what I see, I don't have the information that we required at that time still isn't available. So I'm just questioning really the purpose of doing this backtracking. It still doesn't lead us to different information on which we can resolve the issue.
Is that a question to Trustee Intomasi or to myself?
Through you.
I think the intention of it is that's why we're asking for the staff to get that information, to gather that information on those three main parts, which was part of the amended motion, for us to have that information at hand prior to the next board meeting, so that we can then either amend, rescind, whatever it may be, in regards to the original motion and the amendments. And the only way that can be dealt with is at a regular board meeting.
So I still question, though, whether we would have by then one of the most crucial piece of information, and that's whether the government is funding us with the money or not.
Okay, and I think that's what we'll know for the next board meeting. We'll have to make that decision. Well, we'll have to make that decision whether we have it or not, right? And we might not, and the decision may be that we wait further. Sorry, Trustee Carabella, then Trustee Murphy, Trustee O'Brien, and Trustee Intomasi.
Well, I guess I'm trying to understand. So it would go to the next board meeting, but with this motion, or just a notice of motion that you'd like the staff to do this, this, and this?
So the request here is to have staff prepare all these informations, because originally it was brought to policy to either create a policy in regards to transportation for special programming. because there's so many motions on the table and we require further information to make that decision or to create the policy, we've asked staff to get the information for us. Once we have that information, we need to go back to the regular board meeting. Because there's so many amendments and pieces to the motion, then we can decide what we do, is whether we rescind and file new motions, but we have that information piece there so that it's cleaner as well. We don't need to vote. Well, we can vote on the staff with the reports, yes. Trustee Murphy.
So just to clarify, we're not going to know about the vision transportation portion. We're not going to know about what our transportation funding is. So the relevant piece of information we need is what is the potential cost that we're looking at. So that, I just wanted to make that clear. That's really what we're asking for in that section.
Oh, sorry.
Maybe speak for Superintendent Loss. We will be able to reasonably determine what the cost would be. We may know what our transportation allocation is by then, possibly. I would suggest to trustees, if it comes down to, if really your decision is coming down to financing, if that's what it is at the end of the day, then you'll make that decision. That's a budgetary decision. So if you think that advanced placement programming should be the kind of the designated destination for gifted students, or all students via transportation, ultimately that comes at a cost, and that would be up to you to decide whether you want to bear that cost. Keeping in mind that we do transport to other specialized optional programming at a cost, at a large cost. And not to preface or throw a wrench in anything, keeping in mind too that we're, kind of conservatively right now looking at a shortfall funding from this year of close to $5 million. So those will be, that'll be part of, obviously part of the determination. I mean, ultimately, if we want to make things work, whatever they are, you decide, and then at a cost too, like you can only square the circle so many ways.
Trustee O'Brien.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. In response to Trustee DeRosa's point about information, the piece of information I don't feel I have to make any kind of decision is, are the gifted students' needs being met now? That's what I feel I don't know, and that's why I would like to have the staff respond to that. I'm still not sure of that. So.
Sorry, Secretary.
I don't think there's a motion on the floor yet to direct staff, but I think what I heard was the operational part of it, transportation costs, but also and whether we want to consider transportation for all students to particular specialized programs. And then thirdly, there was a question about the programming itself. So we can bring back that for sure.
Trustee Antomasi and then Trustee Carabello.
So, through you, Madam Chair, to answer Trustee DeRosa, we have to go back to remove the hold in order for us to move forward. That's the reason why we're revisiting it and going back and then clean up the mess, and then we can move forward. Otherwise, we can't.
Trustee Carabello.
So just to make clear, like the idea that transportation is not just for transportation's sake, it was like one beginning to address the needs of the gifted students. And we're talking about that, evaluating. I'm just wondering how the staff will evaluate how their needs are being met, because I think we're doing a survey even regarding that. So I don't know the time of that either, or how the staff will do that.
I think, again, we go back to the motion. I think we also need to look at the fact that AP is not deemed a gifted program. It's a program that's available to all students, and all students still have to apply whether their IEP is gifted or not. So that's the equity piece of it. And then that's why I asked for the ministry requirements in regards to would this fall in line? Are we meeting the needs, or are we outside of the needs? So that is all a moving piece. I know that there is a survey that's going on, and that it was actually through SEAC, and Superintendent Cipriano, if you just want to maybe let everybody know because not everybody's in attendance at SEAC.
Sure. Through you, Madam Chair. So the question about are we meeting the needs? I've shared with you that we had a student survey for all of our gifted students that came back with results of how they felt their needs were being met. Through SEAC, through requests from our ABC reps at SEAC, it was requested that we have a similar survey of parents of gifted students, both elementary and secondary. We've been developing that survey with our research department. It's 99% complete. It will be going out, I believe, at the end of next week. It'll be open, I believe, for 2 weeks to gifted parents only. We will collate the results, bring it back to you, the board, and to SEAC, share those results of what our parents think. Again, and hopefully the timing might work out well with our May board meeting, and we could possibly add that information as part of our report back to you.
Thank you. Trustee O'Brien.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair, to Cipriano. I value surveys. I know some of them are even legislated. I wonder if there are other tools that you can use to determine, to answer that question, besides surveys.
Are you able to trust?
Sorry, can you repeat I'm uncertain of the question.
Is there another thing we can do besides surveys? Research.
Again, it would. If you're asking what other metric can we use to determine the success of gifted students, again, we could probably look at other metrics like report card marks, graduation rates. Again, I don't know. Again, I'm speaking a little bit off the top of my head. I don't know if I think through research we probably could gather that information. Again, that's different though than I think earlier I heard about. Are we meeting their needs? I'm not sure if determining graduation rates or report card marks would be a proxy for meeting a student's needs.
I would agree to disagree on that. I think some kind of performance appraisal of what these kids are doing, to me, would be meeting their needs. They have a need to succeed. They need.
I was just going to say, but I just want to bring us back. We're off topic. Like, we're getting way off topic. We're now going into gifted students and whether or not our programming meets their needs. Transportation is nothing to do with gifted programming. It's about providing transportation to gifted students to the AP program. If I believe we're actually having, that's why there's surveys being done through SEAC, is to talk about the gifted programming. I just want to keep us on track that this isn't what the discussion is we're not here to talk about the gifted programming. We're here to talk about the actual transportation to the gifted. I just want to keep us on track with that, because I think we could get off onto a very different need, and this actually probably should belong at the SEAC meeting, and then we take their recommendations back from there. So, okay. Eric, can I get somebody to make a motion, or do I need to hand the gavel down in regards to the staff reports? Okay, so Trustee Antomasi moves that the staff will come back for the May 7th board meeting for the piece on equity. Sorry, Secretary, you want to add something?
I'm just, in light of the timelines that Superintendent Cipriano mentioned around the survey that's going to parents, I'm not sure we'd be able to provide a full. Could it be the second one in May?
Yes.
I just think it'd be on the research side. I think the rest of the report, in terms of estimating busing costs and things like that, we could do. I don't want to say easily, but we could hit that target. But the survey data might take a little bit more time.
So, Trustee Antomasi, are you okay with that? Do you want me to?
Absolutely.
Do you want me to read the motion? Or you got the motion?
I'm fine with not reading it.
Okay.
I know what the motion is. Thank you.
Are all the trustees okay with what we're looking at? Okay. So, can we have a seconder? Trustee DeRosa? Okay. So, can we have a seconder to the motion? Trustee Duarte. Questions? Trustee DeRosa.
I just want to make a point about timing of all this. Where the reports may be ready end of May. Budget announcements get made. We're going to start a budgeting process. I'm just wondering whether we'll have all this information in a month or so in order to be able to move forward differently, that's all. But I'm not opposed to what's being talked about.
Is there any other questions? Okay, we'll move to a vote. Trustee Giornota. Trustee Charlevoix.
In favor.
Trustee Duarte.
In favor.
Trustee DeRosa.
In favor.
Trustee Murphy.
In favor.
Trustee Carabella.
In favor.
Trustee Intomasi.
In favor.
Trustee O'Brien. We're voting on the staff creating the reports and bringing it to the May 21st board meeting so we can revisit the motion and ensure that we're within.
In favor.
Motion passes. Thank you. Moving to item 5.3, policy II-41, school uniform dress code and school dress code. Trustee Giornota.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The report says prepared by myself, but I can also, Trustee Agnew is part and parcel with me on this discussion report. So the purpose is to provide an opportunity for discussion on policy II-41, school uniform dress code, school dress code. So at the March 19th regular board meeting, it was determined that further discussion regarding various stakeholder feedback of policy, that should read II-41, school uniform dress code, school dress code, would continue at the upcoming policy meeting on April the 9th, tonight. This policy was last reviewed in February 2018, so it's now placed before us, the policy committee, for further review. I would like to just suggest that policy II-41, as per our discussion at the last board meeting and through some stakeholder comments that we've received, to offer up to our fellow trustees the opportunity to, instead of having one supplier, to have two suppliers. We feel that our stakeholders are just looking for some sort of choice. So rather just one supplier to go to two suppliers. And that's up for discussion and comments and suggestions. And
Right. Okay, so we'll do Trustee Murphy, Trustee O'Brien, then Trustee Carabella.
Through you, Madam Chair, thank you for putting the policy together, Trustee Giornota. I had an informal survey done through my wife and her friends, and basically the discussion was there's mixed reviews on whether it's MacArthur's or ISW. So I put it forward. It said, if you then had a choice between the two, knowing that it's going to cost you more money, let's say 10% more, because the volumes of each particular supplier will be lessened, would you still want that option? And their response was yes. So just a non-scientific informal survey.
Trustee O'Brien.
Thank you to you, Madam Chair. Trustee Giornota. You're more in touch with your ratepayers in Georgetown than I am. Does the issue of how far they travel, do you feel that's not really a concern of your ratepayers?
Trustee Carabella. Trustee Rosa.
Okay. So can you explain to me what do you mean by two suppliers? So one particular school would choose one supplier, so the school has a vote on which supplier they want?
Thank you, Trustee Carabella. No, even in the policy itself, if you go to page 63 of our documents, which is page 4 of 8, under uniform supplier, it talks about elementary schools must use the board's authorized uniform supplier, that's singular, and then it talks about the third point down, authorized uniform suppliers. So all we're saying and bringing forward is if through the RFP process or through purchasing that we get two approved suppliers to produce and let our parents purchase, they get to choose.
Trustee Rosa.
Just as a matter of principle, every time you have multiple suppliers, service gets better, price goes down, and generally speaking, it's all good, because they will compete on price. And it tends to have a pressure in keeping prices low. The other thing that I would propose for consideration in this discussion is that the less fortunate children be included in their intentions when we pick this supplier or these suppliers. And what I mean by that is they should have a program to allow for subsidizing the lesser fortunate kids in our schools.
Trustee DeRosa, in the policy, they do speak to, I don't have the exact verbiage looking at it, where if some family cannot afford the uniform, that'll be taken care of.
Trustee Intomasi.
So, through you, Madam Chair, there's quite a few issues here. One of the most important issue is economies of scale. So, if we give it to one person and they know that they're able to supply X amount, they can get it to a price. When you break it down to two suppliers, I don't agree with Trustee DeRosa simply because it doesn't work. In theory, you're perhaps correct, but actually it doesn't work. The other thing is that currently or in the past, we've always had a situation where the supplier provides X amount of uniforms for the needy, and they also provide the board with an income. I'm not sure what the income was previously. But having said that, I really think it's very difficult to administer. I think we as a Catholic board, by instituting uniforms, we're making a statement of who we are. And I think to have two suppliers with various colors within a school, because you do get kids that go from one school to another, I think you're watering down the brand. The main concern here is that we want somebody that's reliable. I don't know that I think it would be difficult to have more than two suppliers respond to an RFP. Is there ever been a case where we have multiple suppliers?
Go ahead.
Trustee Secretary Dale.
I was just going to suggest that for some of those questions, our purchasing head honcho, Dan, is here. I think all of our superintendents, probably other than Ryan, have had a direct role in uniform, either initiating, writing the policy, implementing the policy. So there's lots of experts if you have specific questions. You might want to direct them to the
Madam Chair. Anybody can respond. Yeah. So it's through the chair, through you, to staff to respond to my queries.
Can you remind me what the queries were, Trustee Intomasi? Sorry.
Queries, economies of scale, okay. So cost, all right? So I think that when we break it down to two suppliers, that cost inevitably is not going to be as competitive as Trustee DeRosa has suggested to us.
Dan, do you want to weigh in? And
Sure, through you, Madam Chair. It's very possible that economies of scale would come into play. Realistically, there's probably 4 suppliers that are in the uniform market. Of those 4, 2 of them are probably legit enough to provide the volumes for Halton Catholic District School Board. Having said that, when you're if you're not committing a certain volume to a proponent or to a vendor, the pricing typically will not be as competitive. If you look at our incumbent at this time, they were able to open up 3 retail locations knowing what their estimated revenues were going to be. And having said that, at that point, they sort of know what margins they can get away with in terms of still turning a profit. As soon as you start dividing that, it is possible that it just will not be as lucrative or even profitable, and you may see a vendor actually step away. In terms of the number of responses we would get through an RFP competitive bid, I've been here for 2. I've seen one, I've overseen another, and typically we do get 4 responses, and it's the same outfits every single time. We do take it out to the market, so it is open for anybody to submit a proposal. The last go around, we had over 30 vendors express interest by picking up the RFP document. Of those plus or over 30 vendors, we received 4. So that gives you an indication of how many players are actually out there and could, in fact, supply or perform a uniform program.
And so the 4 submit. So is the concern that's coming through loud and clear to me would be price concern? Because if I was a competitor and I could get 50% of something is better than 0% of 0, right?
Unless that 50% doesn't cover your overhead.
But if we go out to try to get 2 suppliers and a supplier steps back, at least we've done a due diligence to try to give our parents some sort of choice, no? I'm just offering a...
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, I'm not opposed to whatever the will of the board is. If it's to bring in multiple vendors, that's what we'll do. But the reality of it is that there just isn't that much competition out there. So you are, in essence, hedging one against the other. I know with other boards, they do have one vendor. At certain boards where they have, for lack of a better term, pre-qualified a number of vendors, it is still one sole vendor per school. So even the way they have broken it up at other school boards, Toronto Catholic, for instance, they may have 3 or 4 vendors that they've pre-qualified, but a school will only deal with one vendor. So, you're still perhaps not giving the parents at that particular school a choice of where they can go. And again, that's sort of to keep that consistency. I guess the main focus of a uniform program is that the uniforms are in fact uniform. And that's why they've sort of come down to the agreement that they would go with a single vendor at a particular location. If the idea was to get pants from one vendor, shirts from another vendor, at that point you may just have a dress code and not a uniform.
Thank you. Trustee DeRosa, then Superintendent Cipriano, I believe, has a response as well, and then Trustee Antomasi, and then Trustee...
Through you, Madam Chair. First of all, to the comments that Trustee Antomasi made about watering down the brand, I think that's... I don't think that would technically happen because we're in a position to dictate what that brand and what the uniform looks like. Regarding, I'm not going to get in an economic discussion of what the benefits are of having one supplier versus multiple suppliers in terms of fostering competition. It's obvious, at least, that the change in suppliers has raised questions of quality, has raised questions of service. I understand that we have the majority of schools who have voted to have to implement a uniform policy, but there seems to be a significant amount of blowback, if you want to call it, on the service and the quality of the current supplier. So, and I believe it's the first term, it's the first contract term that we have with them. So we have to take into account the feedback that we're being given. So.
Superintendent Cipriano, and then...
My office is responsible for the uniform, and so we field the complaints that come usually to the office. Although I'm new to the role, and Superintendent Cipriano can certainly speak to it as well, the amount of complaints that we received when ISW took on the contract were many, and the amount of calls that I fielded, since I took the role in December have been 0, in that the stores seem much better equipped to deal with the concerns of parents at the store level than they were when they first took on the contract. And, I mean, I like McCarthy's as well as ISW, but just in terms of the amount of complaints that we've had, I know, like, there were many when they first took on that contract, but their customer service, you know, in my estimation at least, has improved significantly.
Sorry, and just to respond to that, I apologize, I beg to differ. We've heard lots of feedback from parents. It may not be coming directly here to the board, but we have seen it. We've seen it through emails, text messages, through parent councils directly that there is. But I can't compare from the McCarthy's because I wasn't paying as much attention to it, so I couldn't gauge whether or not it's more or less. But I know there was also complaints with McCarthy's as well. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt, but we've got Trustee Intomasi was up next.
Through you, Madam Chair. So it would seem to me that if we have 40 people picking up the packages and only 4 actually submitting proposals, not everybody meets the pre-qualifications. Would that be correct?
Not necessarily. So when we put out a competitive bid, we do post that electronically for the entire marketplace to feel free to participate in. When you have 30 to 35 proponents picking up a document, a lot of times it's just for general interest. They have perhaps no interest in responding, but just curious as to see what is going on there, perhaps, you know, in terms of maybe having affiliates overseas or whatever that may wish to supply or provide uniforms for the program. Of the ones that do submit are the genuine proponents that are in the uniform business. And then from there, we do a compliancy, and assuming they all meet their mandatory requirements, we then evaluate them technically, and then we do an evaluation on their pricing package as well. And I know, you know, we hear a lot of, well, how come we're not with Old Navy? How come we don't investigate with Walmart? Retailers have absolutely zero interest in a uniform program. It's not profitable for them. A retailer like Old Navy or Walmart, their main goal is to bring product in and get it out the front door as fast as humanly possible. And so there'd be no interest in them stocking any sort of garments for a uniform program. And that's why I say it really is limited as to the amount of uniform providers that are out there. Realistically, there's 5. And then maybe only 3 of them could sufficiently do a board of this size.
Superintendent Cipriano, I cut you out of the order. I'm sorry. Do you want back in the line?
One comment around the different vendors and different providers. I sat on the original committee for uniforms in the board, 2008, I believe. And we had parents, we had trustees, we had principals. At the time, I was a principal at St. Gabriel, and we visited different schools. I may have shared this anecdote with you. We visited Hamilton, and I believe at that time, I believe still now, Pat, you could probably speak to this, they allow different vendors, and one of the biggest complaints from parents and principals in that board was that there was a real discrepancy in the colors, the shades of blue. Again, I think maybe Dan can speak. Even from vendor to vendor, those shades of blue are different, but especially when they allow to multiple vendors, including the Old Navys and the Walmarts. That's what I remember taking from one of the biggest drawbacks. Although they had choice, that was the drawback that they shared at that time. Again, just to kind of put that out there at that time, and that committee was made up of parents, trustees, principals, and superintendents.
Thank you. Trustee Carabella and then Trustee Charlevoix.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. So I was just going to say that I like that idea of, I have experience with a school that has a uniform supplier, but then they allow the parents to get blue pants from Old Navy or whatever, and you can buy a crest for $2 and put it on your white golf shirt. I think that just addresses, I haven't heard, I like that way, and I always thought it was a good way that allows people who don't want to spend that much money at that level when kids are growing so fast to just get the clothes, good quality clothes that you need for the year. So I wanted to put that out there. As an option. And I guess we've had also many delegations over the 4 years that I've just been with, and several staff reports too that maybe if they can be compiled for us. They're hard to find. I wouldn't remember which dates they were, but that would be interesting to get that feedback and look at it again. And then I did wanted to ask, when is the RFP due again? What is the timeline for the next decision?
Through you, Madam Chair, the current contract with the incumbent will expire on December 31st of this year. Having said that, we were supposed to be in the process of issuing the RFP now in the hopes of being able to award by the end of June, thus giving the vendor about 6 months to put together a uniform program. Part of the issues when in-school wear came in, to be quite honest, and I'm in no way defending the proponent, but we awarded that contract in September, and it gave them about 3 months to put together a uniform program from scratch. With no prior history of what our spend might be in terms of sizing and all that good stuff. So it did put them a little bit behind. Again, I'm not defending the proponent, but we'd hate to put ourselves in a situation again where we're late in awarding a contract and not giving the vendor sufficient time. And just as what I've been observing and what I've been hearing with McCarthy's, that originally went into receivership after they lost our contract, and they're now up and running again. They no longer have a retail space in Halton, so it would be absurd to think that if we awarded in September, they would be able to secure retail space and set up a full-blown uniform program. So in my mind, we really need to give, regardless of how we proceed and regardless of who is awarded the new contract, they really do need sufficient time to develop that program. So if this is something that is going to be in discussion for the next few weeks, I don't even know if we would propose to extend the current contract for 1 year until we really finalize how we wish to proceed. Just a thought.
Thank you. Okay, so we've got Trustee Charlevoix, Superintendent Loft has a comment, Trustee O'Brien, and Trustee Carabella.
So
Did I miss you? I'm sorry. Trustee DeRosa is in the...
So through you, Madam Chair, do we have any sort of numbers on how many uniforms ISW sold in the last year to give us sort of a reference of if we were to bring in two vendors, say cut that in half, how that would affect the overall sales of these two, I guess, so-called competitors?
I don't have the exact volumes. I am in the process of getting that from the vendor. I can say that the last time we looked at it, sales are about $2.5 million annually. So if you were to cut that in half, again, I don't know what their margins are on their sales, but when you look at the incumbents who are now currently running 3 retail spaces, I would be very hard-pressed to understand how they can keep that going with half the sales. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean they need to have 3 retail locations. That was a service that they decided to put into place, so that was on them. There's always options such as mail order, and I don't think that would be successful because a lot of times the return rates would be quite high if you don't have your child being able to properly try something on. So we've never posed that question. If the sales were cut in half, how would you carry on? But I can't imagine, the service being there in terms of retail outlets, et cetera.
Thank you. Superintendent Law.
Through you, Madam Chair, just to also bring another point up, we also have a portion in our policy that directs you to the uniform supplier, and we have an obligation under Board Policy I-31, apparel purchases and fair labor practices, to ensure that our vendors are following the fair labor practices.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for that reminder. Trustee O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just wondering, perhaps you could answer this. How do you vet for fair labor practices?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, I'm going to actually ask Superintendent Cipriano to address that question.
Sure. Through you, Madam Chair. When I was in the role that now Superintendent Kroll sits in, on a yearly basis, I would get from the vendor, and I believe Purchasing Department would also get the same report, a report outlining an audit of all of their sites that they manage their apparel, that they purchase their apparel from, including places outside of Canada, an independent auditor that audits for certain components around things like child labor, fair labor, ventilation. Maybe Dan, have I hit all the points? And we'd receive that on a yearly basis, ensuring that they've passed all of those minimum requirements for all of the locations, factories that they would have their clothing and apparel pieces delivered to them in Canada.
Just adding to that, it is based on international labor standards, so those third-party auditors, and by the way, our policy actually stipulates that it could be done via third-party or internally, but the last two suppliers that we've had have gone the route of having a third-party auditor there. So again, everything from wages to working conditions, health and safety, all that is taken into account in their audits. And I'm pleased to say with McCarthy's and with the incumbent in school where we haven't had any issues to date.
So just to go back in order, next up is Trustee Carabello, then we've got Trustee DeRosa, Ian Tomasi, and then Trustee Murphy.
Thank you, through Madam Chair. I have three things. So, do you have experience with one vendor, but then the option to give parents an Old Navy and that? Like, is that attractive or still feasible for the one vendor if he knows that maybe, I don't know, a quarter of the parents might go to Old Navy?
Again, that would be sort of a business decision on the part of the vendor itself. I couldn't say for certain how profitable the business would be if they only got a portion of it. Having said that, if you are going that route, you're sort of, and again, it doesn't matter to me, but you're sort of going off that whole point of having a uniform. Now you're sort of just incorporating a dress code. So your child will show up in blue pants and a crested shirt, wherever that's from. I honestly don't know what their business plans are and what their margins are, whether their margins are on the shirts, whether their margins are on the pants, maybe a bit of both. I'm really not sure of that. I couldn't answer that.
So, and regarding the fair labor, I mean, this is... we have other things that we purchase as the board, the spiritware and all sorts of computer equipment and stuff like that. And that doesn't go through the fair labor process, I think. If I'm wrong, let me know. But so it's unfair in a sense that we're just applying it to uniforms. And you say that it means that we have that they have to comply to international labor standards. So, or national or international labor standards. So does that mean Old Navy and Walmart doesn't? Like, these companies have been around.
I'm not saying they don't. I'm saying they're not interested in providing a uniform program, the retailers. at the end of the day, going back to our providers for Spirit Wear, they do have to sign off that they are sourcing their garments from approved, manufacturers. So we do force them to also adhere to the same policy as our uniform provider in regards to tech equipment and desks, and we just haven't done that. Perhaps it's just because it's not, it wasn't as commonplace to see sweatshops for the manufacturer of laptops or student desks and chairs. It's always been very prominent within the apparel industry, and that's why that focus was there.
Trustee DeRosa, and there's an interesting history piece on the fair labor piece. I think it actually originated in this board.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a comment. I think consistency in the uniform is important, and I'm picking up off a comment that Superintendent Cipriano made a little while ago. So that's it.
Did somebody record that? That's the shortest for Trustee DeRosa. Sorry. Trustee Intomas.
So I'd like to move the argument forward. So we have 14 schools, I believe, that do not subscribe to the uniform. As trustees, we have the power to dictate that perhaps all the schools should follow, and that is don't make any exceptions. I think if we do that, then perhaps we're going to be in a better position to make it equitable, and perhaps we could also work in the second supplier. As it is now, $2.5 million, if you break that down into 4 communities, what are we looking at, $300,000 per community or more? Maybe Oakville or Burlington would have more. But any event, so I would really want to move towards us as trustees deciding that perhaps we shouldn't give a vote to the schools and make it mandatory. After all, we are Halton Catholic District School Board, and we are the Board of Trustees elected by the people to make the decision. Having said that, each of us has a vote, so we can go that. But I would, if I could, say I would like to have one supplier. Thank you.
So we've got Trustee Murphy and then Trustee Giornota. I'm sure you've just opened up a bigger discussion and a bigger channel.
I would like to thank Trustee Intomasi for opening up that can of worms. It's not like he's not hated enough already. He actually is trying to commission 14 more schools to dislike this poor man. That comes from a place of love, Vince, as you know. I'm not going to touch that one. Through you, Madam Chair, I would like to know if we can propose a case study to McCarthy and ISW and pose the question to them that if there were 2 suppliers, what would your unit pricing be, and under what parameters would you agree to such a scenario?
If I may speak to that, we'd have to be very careful with that in terms of our purchasing legislation, the broader public sector procurement directive. If we start doing that, we go down this slippery slope of potentially being accused of bid shopping. And I think that's where we really need to be careful. If we start asking for pricing based on various scenarios, and then we go out for a competitive bid based on one scenario over another, we could run ourselves into some hot water.
Can I just follow up on that, Madam Chair? Then can we add it in our FRP as an alternate to the base bid?
Absolutely.
Trustees Giornota.
So what wonderful discussion we've just had on our discussion item. Just a couple of points I wanted to mention. We talked about where we have the 2 different suppliers, and Superintendent Cipriano mentioned that they were different colors. We currently have that now because we've changed suppliers. So McCarthy's was there, it was grandfathered, they're allowed to wear their McCarthy's, and they're allowed to now wear the ISW. So we're there anyways. So that's not going to make a difference to that. Number 2, to Superintendent, so worst case scenario, I don't want to, cut off my nose to spite my face. If we went to 2 suppliers, is there a potential where no suppliers would want the contract? Is that a potential at all, do you think? You don't have a lawyer present, but what do you think?
It's quite possible that it just wouldn't be of interest to one vendor or maybe both. Surely somebody would take it at some point because they're going to know that eventually that business will come over if the other just walks away from it. It really is difficult to say. I honestly do not know what their margins are on a uniform program.
Thank you. And so this was brought forward in the spirit of forwarding the vision for our Halton Catholic District School Board to be uniformed. And as you know, Halton Hills, not one school in Halton Hills, has uniforms. So Superintendent Crowell, with all due respect, there wouldn't be a lot of complaints because they don't have the uniform in a lot of those schools, right? But I started off with giving our parents choice, and we ended up giving our parents no choice, so I don't know how we got there. But I'm just offering it up. Is there any way that we can at least try? If it doesn't work, it's not cost effective, at least we can go to our stakeholders and say, we tried to give you a choice. Because what I'm hearing is they don't like it being rammed down their throats to tell them where to go buy their clothes.
Sure. Can I just add to that comment? Is it maybe possible for us to see if there's an appetite through it for the suppliers before we send it out to bid, before we go down that path? Like, would it be something that we can enter into a conversation just to say, look, this might be the direction from the board. What are your thoughts?
We could. We'd have to tread lightly, to be quite honest. But there's no reason why we couldn't go through that process. Having said that, what we could do is do a request for information, an RFI, to see, in fact, who would be interested in a portion of the business. And then from there, you would generate your interest and then issue a formal RFP. We certainly could do that. Having said that, we would have to have some sort of idea as to what volumes would be available to each vendor, and I think that's where the difficult part is. Are we saying we're just going to split it down the middle, 50-50, but the reality of it may well be 70-30, and so inevitably you're going to have a vendor come back and say, well, we expressed interest on 50-50, but the reality of it is it's 70-30, and we're, for lack of a better term, losing our shirt on this business. So that's, where we need to be careful. If we're going to say, you have up to a 50% stake in it, that's what they're going to base their program on, and that includes retail outlets, their pricing strategy, the services that they're going to provide. So, we want to be in a position where we're not committing any sort of quantity to them. So.
What kind of quantity, right? Now, on the positive side, to look on the optimistic side, if a vendor only got 30% of 100, they would say, why am I only getting 30%? What's wrong? Do I need to up my game? Do I need to do something different?
So I guess, Trustee Zernata, it goes back to you. This is your discussion item. How would you like to proceed with this?
I'd still like to discuss this. We have a lot of opinions. We're close to being on the same. We have one outlier. But I'd like to continue to talk about this. I think it's important. So could we get a template and could we tweak? There's not much to tweak in the actual policy. The verbiage is there. It's just talking about maybe potentially looking at multiple suppliers. I don't know. I don't have the verbiage in my head, and I just think that our parents, if we came back to them and said, we tried, but we couldn't do this because of this, this, and this, they would understand, right? If you're going to say, okay, it's going to cost you double what it costs now, they're going to say, okay, fine, I understand, but you tried.
This is just my opinion as a parent with 2 kids in the system and as a parent on the street. I can tell you this. If you award to McCarthy's, you're going to get complaints. If you award to in schoolwear, you're going to get complaints. If you're going to award to another vendor, you're going to get complaints. And then there's those that are just detractors of a uniform program entirely. So it doesn't matter who you have in place, you're going to get those complaints. You know, it's one of those things where you're just not going to win. If you even put in 2 vendors, you're probably still going to get those same complaints. And it could be the fact that they're just detractors of a uniform program, and it has absolutely nothing to do with the vendors that are in place. I've had parents in Burlington call me and complain about the location of the Burlington retail outlet within schoolwear, and they're a Burlington parent. Meanwhile, they were previously driving to QEW and North Service, or Trafalgar and the North Service Road, right? So those are the sort of complaints you get, and you know they're probably just detractors of the uniform program. We certainly could, test the market to see if there is an appetite for a share of it, and I'm sure at first there will be interest in that, but there may be a shortfall somewhere along the line, which may end up putting us back to one vendor anyways.
Thank you. I've got Trustee DeRosa, then I've got Superintendent Cipriano, and then Trustee Carabao.
When is the contract actually come up for renegotiation?
The end of the contract within schoolwear is December 31 of this year, 2019. So the new contract would begin January 1, 2020.
So will there be towards the end of the contract or at some point in time a benchmarking of their service? Benchmark it against prior years, maybe?
Well, in terms of their fill rate, if that was a benchmark that we would be looking at, it certainly has improved since year one. There's no question about that. In terms of, I'm not sure what the exact numbers of the fill rate when we first implemented them. It was probably fairly low. They're probably in the 90% range now. If that's a metric that we're looking to use, there has been improvement, and we can get those numbers for sure.
Because I may want to suggest that before moving this in any one direction, is that let's analyze what we've got now, right? And then we have more data or more evidence to see what direction we can take this.
Superintendent Cipriano.
Just a little bit more background. When we made significant changes to the uniform policy, I believe in 2010, prior to the changes, our former director, prior to Paula Dawson, Mike Poutler, created a public consultation process. I think, Andrea, you were there with me. There were several principals, myself, and it was incredibly well attended. Parents have a great investment in uniforms, both financially and otherwise. And it was at St. Peter's School in Milton. We had small group tables that principals, at the time I was a principal, that we facilitated conversations about what's good about it, what's bad about it, what do you want to see in the new policy. Considering you're all suggesting considering major changes, before you do, and I appreciate the consultation you had with your wife, because my wife too tells me many times what needs to be changed in the board, and especially because now Superintendent Kroll oversees this, I would suggest a very robust consultation process. Jeff? Yes. I'm not sure if I would have suggested this a year ago. I'm kidding. So if you're going to consider those kinds of changes, you all have some very compelling points and arguments why you want to make those changes. Our parents will want to have an input. They'll want to have a say, whether it's a survey. I do know we survey a lot of our parents, and so they might have that survey fatigue. You might want to reconsider. Again, it was quite a while ago. Andrew, do you remember the year? I think it was 2010, 2009. I do recall that it was very well, great attendance, and parents appreciated the ability to have that face-to-face, to share some concerns, to have feedback, to have a back and forth. And so you might want to, considering it's 10 years later, have something similar, considering that you are thinking about some significant changes to the policy.
Thank you. Trustee Carabella, do you still have?
Yes, just want to add to that. It is part of the Education Act on the uniform and fundraising that you need stakeholder community input before a change. And I had a question for your parents. So were they just, the question is, are you saying that parents want a uniform but they didn't want a supplier, so they didn't think of just going to a white shirt, like a dress code?
Through you, Madam Chair, Trustee Cabell, I'm saying that the parents that I've spoken to, because I will not speak to every parent in Halton Hills, they have indicated to me through the conversations I've had that they would just like a choice.
Trustee Chernota, what are your thoughts on maybe actually doing a stakeholder piece with this?
I love it.
Look at.
I absolutely
So
love
is that you making a motion that we actually...
Yes, I'll be making a motion to... I think it's a great idea. I think that would have to defer to Secretary Daly as far as timing is concerned and the amount of work that goes into public consultations, because I did sit in one for a boundary review and it takes a lot of work. It was done very well. Superintendent Crowell.
I'm supportive of that as well. My only concern would be that we have our contract ending and then the RFP process about to start, and so we need to be very thoughtful about the timelines around this. If we want to do it robust, as Superintendent Cipriano suggested,
I'll be there with you.
I know you will.
Can we extend that contract by 6 months?
Well, and this is where I was going to speak. I guess somebody would probably have to put in a motion to extend the current contract. I don't think 6 months is a good decision, to be honest, because that would put a start date of about August 1, and I don't think you want a new uniform supplier starting a uniform program during Christmas of the uniform season. So the whole reasoning behind the January 1 start is because it's a bit of a soft start. The demands aren't there. It gives the incumbent or the proponent a little bit more time to ensure they're ready for the rush. July, August are very heavy, and I guess the beginning of September in terms of uniform sales. So I don't think you'd want to award a contract for a summer start. So if we were going to extend, I would probably recommend we extend it for a year.
Sorry, Trustee Charlevoix.
And if we have that consultation, let's hopefully invite our little peoples as well, because the students are the ones wearing the uniforms.
Trustee Chernota, what do you think about this? Is your discussion item?
So there's a lot of what we can do and a lot of what we can't do. I think that we don't want to put the contracts at risk, so we should listen to our expert and not extend it 6 months. Is there a way, we have all the brain trust in this room, that we can get a public consultation? To be perfectly honest, we are surveyed so much that I don't think we get the voice of our customers to do a public consultation, but through you, Secretary Daly.
I'll just suggest, and I have limited experience with this other than the about 3.5 foot wide file of uniform policies that the previous director left me. If we're going to suggest major changes to the uniform policy, it'll be, as I think as Superintendent Cipriano said, it'll be, people will want to weigh in. So I don't think it's something we can do quickly. Like if we're talking about saying it's mandatory to every school, that will generate tons of stakeholder feedback, both pro and con. I would think that would be a lengthy process. If we're really just looking at putting an S on uniform supplier to suppliers, that really comes down to whether or not the competing companies can make a business case to do it. But there's certain things that parents will get engaged in. Uniform is certainly one of them. So I think if we are looking at or thinking about really revamping the policy in whatever way we see fit, we have to do it in a real thoughtful way and be able to get good stakeholder feedback first.
So what I'm hearing, it looks like a tiered approach. Tier 1 approach is just to change the policy to tweak it so that we can potentially look at more than one supplier and then plan some sort of a stakeholder feedback to talk about the whole idea of a uniform in our school system. Is that what I'm...
My only concern is that if we have the stakeholder meeting, well, one major concern is that my wife attends. That's a major concern. But apart from that is that if we elicit these responses and then we can't give them what they want, if we can't give them to suppliers because the economics aren't there and we don't have two competent suppliers who want to respond to the RFP, then that to me would be a concern. I would like to find out, if we can, first, if there is an opportunity to have two suppliers.
So I feel like we're spinning our wheels a little bit here because we've circled around a whole bunch of different items. So would it make sense, I think Trustee Murphy or you had somebody suggested about putting out for an RFI, maybe that's the start, and see if there's even an appetite for it, and if that's not the case, then we come back and look at...
I'm comfortable to go that route with an RFI, but that will still put us pretty far out in terms of an award. It will put us probably into September, with all honesty. And again, we may be putting our parents in that same situation where the incumbent or the new proponent really only has a few months to put together a program. You have to remember that the apparel that they purchase for the winter, they're purchasing in the summer. The apparel that they're, purchasing for the summer, they're purchasing in the winter, and vice versa. So there is quite a lead time just in terms of even making sure that the inventory is there, let alone set up a program. And that's why I'm saying 6 months is, giving them, I would think, ample time at that point. But we may be just putting ourselves in the very same position we did 2 years ago with a late award in the fall.
So maybe then, sorry, I think Andrea's got her hand up, but maybe the start then, if we want to go that route, is looking at extending the contract for a year, regardless, to allow us the opportunity to make whatever changes that might be required to the policy. Sorry.
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. What I was going to say is the last time we did this, it wasn't, we did have what Camilla was describing as like a town hall, but we had like a focus group activity, several tables, and then they moved around, and I think they considered 3 or 4 different questions. So in terms of how you structure the consultation, I wouldn't necessarily be putting out there, we're thinking of going with 2 suppliers, what do you think? I would leave it much more open than that and just get general feedback about school uniforms. Maybe we can come up with, design the actual structure of it so you're gathering feedback on a variety of levels, which may or may not determine what you do with the policy, whether you go board-wide or whether you go 2 suppliers or whether you leave it alone. You'll get feedback either way. The other thing we did is there were 3 components. We surveyed the principals themselves because they had first-hand experience in implementing, and we also sent out a questionnaire for school council. So we gathered information from 3 different areas, from the councils themselves, and they had to submit as a council, not individual council members, and then principals, as well as we held a broader consultation that was open to parents and students. So,
Trustee DeRosa.
Yeah, I'd like to say that before we put the cat amongst the pigeons and go out there with our RFIs and proposals, I think this requires a little bit more looking into. And specifically, I would think, why those 14 schools constantly vote against uniforms. So I'm trying to make a case for additional study before we put it out in the marketplace, because you don't know what the consequences of that are going to be.
Sorry. Thank you. Trustee O'Brien?
I don't know the voting process. Thank you to you, Madam Chair. The voting process, but is there, when schools vote no, do they ever give reasons?
I'm going to answer this question because just in my past experience, half the time, parent council doesn't even put it out to the general school. The parent council is actually reviewing it and voting it down and not allowing it going to the general population, which is a bit of a problem. So it should go to everybody, and I think that there's something there, and I've heard that happen in more than one occasion, and I'm not sure, and I think that maybe we need to look at what the policy and procedure is and how, and maybe there's something that's allowing that to happen, but that's been my feedback, and there's only a few schools. So.
Okay, so from what I understand, so we should move forward and kind of move on to another topic, but so if we extend it for 1 year, so it'll be December 31st, 2020?
For a termination date would be, yes, December 31, 2020.
That'll give us time to decide what route we want to go for stakeholder feedback.
I sure hope so.
So we can do it right the first time, right?
Well, you know, at the end of the day, you don't want to issue a contract and then change the spirit of that policy, because it becomes a bit of a mess that way. So, you know, for any commodity that we might RFP for, it's in our best interest to ensure that the scope of the RFP is in fact as concrete as it can be, without having to go and change it further.
I'm okay with that, because I've been involved in a uniform discussion that was very robust and lively about 10 years ago. And I've also been involved in a boundary review with the tables that are talking about certain topics. And they're two different types of consultation. So I'm okay with that, to delay it so that we can get all the information and put all our ducks in a row and find out what our parents really want. I'm just trying in the spirit to move the vision along, to give our parents some choices and to go into a uniform for our Catholic schools, something that's easy for the staff at the schools that can monitor also. So
I think the way it works is that the policy committee will make a motion or make a recommendation to the regular board meeting that we extend the contract for the uniform supplier for 1 year to allow further review of the policy in regards to uniforms. Trustee Carabella?
I just don't think you need to say for the review of the policy. You would just extend it for a year and we know, whereas...
Well, it has to stay on, it has to come back as it has to stay on the agenda for policy.
The policy is up for review in 2021 anyway.
So, trustees, you're not, is that okay?
Yes, that's fine with me, yep.
So can we take that to a vote then? Okay. Trustee O'Brien, do you need me to
I have a question first. So are we contravening the procurement policy by extending this contract for another year? Because then it's not equitable and it's not open, it's not transparent. You're not taking an RFP, you're not putting it out to the public or to the vendors.
The unique piece of this is that it's not board money that we're spending. So it is the community that is paying for the uniforms. It's not board money. So in this regard, the BPS doesn't completely apply. Having said that, we would still follow strictly the procedures around the BPS just to ensure that we are open and transparent in the process.
So are we okay to move forward then in extending? Okay.
We are okay to extend if that is the will of the board, yeah.
Okay, so the motion would be that the policy committee recommend to the board that we extend the contract for the uniform supplier by 1 year to allow for further review of policy II-41. Do we have a mover? Trustee Zernata and Trustee O'Brien, you'll second it? Okay, we'll go for a vote. Trustee O'Brien? Trustee Antomas?
Against.
Trustee Carabella?
In favor.
Trustee Murphy?
In favor.
Trustee DeRose?
In favor.
Trustee DeWard?
In favor.
Trustee Charlevoix?
In favor.
Trustee Zernata? Motion passed. Thank you. All right. So just keeping in mind the time, it is 9:38. We're going into information items, 6.1. This is new procedure VI-62, use of technology and digital citizenship. Superintendent Percassin.
Yes, this is the accompanying procedure VI-62 to the policy I-43, use of technology and digital citizenship. And you have before you the associated policies and procedures. The purpose of the procedure is to support the application of policy I-43. We have transferred much of the language from the original policy into the procedure and updated a number of issues and concerns outlined in previous conversations around this topic. So we have application and scope references, definitions before you, along with some principles which has been taken directly from the policy. Requirements outlined and duties of everyone, as well as the HCDSB supported online educational tools. We've outlined the tools that are supported by the Halton Catholic District School Board, as well as the Ontario Ministry of Education. Considerations, as well as additional information around data ownership, corporate digital citizenship, overall considerations, and what students are responsible for, along with ending with consequences, remedial and disciplinary action. At your final page is what we've talked about a little bit earlier about online educational applications and tools consent form, and that is to be completed by the teacher when they do choose an application that is not supported by the board, and to be completed by parents and guardians in support of the application being used in the classroom.
Thank you. Is there any questions at this time? Okay, moving along to Trustee Caravella.
Thank you. So how often would this form be filled out? How often do teachers change apps or things like that during the day?
I think it's through you, Madam Chair, I think it's a difficult thing to predict, and it is our way of ensuring that our teachers are considering the applications that they're using and aware that they need to seek consent in order to use an application. So it would be any resource or tool that they would like to use in their classroom for educational purposes that may be outside of what's supported. Depending upon how avidly the applications are used in the classroom, it could be quite frequent, but we created the form with great intentionality, not just around the issue of consent, but also to ensure that our teachers were taking into consideration curriculum expectations as well as the application of the actual tool that they're using. It's like, something that is to be helpful to curriculum. It is not the curriculum. And so we want to make sure that it's thoughtful. And it's very difficult for us to actually control all of the applications that are out there. And so much is coming out every day that we just wanted to ensure that there was some thoughtfulness around choice.
Superintendent O'Brien. Trustee O'Brien.
Thank you to you, Madam Chair. Superintendent Percassin, I've been to many anti-bullying presentations, and many excellent, but very few on digital citizenship. Trustee Tomasi and I had the privilege of going to one at St. Anne's, thought it was excellent. Is there a movement towards more digital citizenship anti-bullying presentations?
Through you, Madam Chair, I think that very much we're concerned that digital citizenship is something that's everyone's responsibility. We talk about it being parents, the school, teachers, etc. We all share in the need to continually educate our students and our young people around those responsibilities, including the collaboration between the global competencies and the Ontario Catholic graduate expectations. So in a broader way, the answer is yes. The more that we talk about digital citizenship and our responsibility, the more we'll be able to coexist within this environment where technology is very much that tool that we use to facilitate our curriculum rather than the other way around. So we never look upon applications and digital tools as controlling our curriculum, but the other way around. They can be an asset to our curriculum, they can be helpful, but they are for us a tool and something that must meet what the curriculum expectations are rather than just something that's fun to do. Although if it can be fun and have an educational purpose and match the curriculum expectations, which is very much the market out there, then that's a good thing too.
Thank you. Moving on to item 6.2, new procedure VI-63, social media. Ms. Swindon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And we were providing for the information of the Policy Committee a new social media procedure that was just passed by Admin Council. Just to give you the background, in 2013 we launched a social media presence for the Halton Catholic District School Board, and we developed guidelines that were posted on our website. They're still posted on our website. We've been wanting to create a procedure to address some of the questions that are not covered within the guidelines and to provide some consistency across the board. The procedure that is before you, you'll notice it's broken down into 6 key areas under requirements. We have authorization to open a school, classroom, program, or department account, conduct on social media, securing school or board-managed social media accounts, privacy and confidentiality, posting student photos, videos, and student work, and then we have the last piece, duty of care. If you'd like me to elaborate on any of the pieces, if you have any questions, I'm open to any feedback.
I just had one question, and I'm trying to find it right now. There was a comment that talked about trustees not having staff or interacting on their personal social media with either students or whatnot. How? That's a difficult one, because then we're talking about Twitter, social media. Even just looking at it, you see that there are teachers and trustees that have students or following them or following back. How do we, that's a hard one to gauge, especially, this is a new policy. These are some things that are already existing. Obviously, knowing that we would keep in mind best practices and making sure that they're therapeutic relationships as opposed to crossing any boundaries.
Yeah, it is. And it is a very... It does become a bit of a slippery slope, because so in the references you'll notice the Ontario Catholic, the OCT regulations, they're very specific in terms of their guidelines for teachers for social media. When you're preparing a procedure that's intended for all staff, and you've already got the majority of your staff who are following these guidelines, it's a little difficult to exclude certain, and so for the purposes of, I just lost the procedure so I can't even reference it, but for the purposes of consistency, and I think that the main concern is maintaining professional conduct on social media. I don't think so much following on Twitter as the concern is perhaps direct messaging on Facebook or Twitter or text messaging. Then it can slip into that gray area where quickly questions of conduct could come into play. So that's why the language is in there. It is referenced and phrased as a best practice, but again, it is, like you said, it's a difficult thing to police. At the end of the day, but the procedure, the guidelines that the OCT puts out are pretty prescriptive. They talk about the distinction between professional and private life, but then they go on to say that off-duty conduct does matter, and sound judgment and duty care should be considered. So that's why we've put that language in there.
Thank you. Is there any? Trustee Charlotte.
Perhaps we could add to the procedure as a possible solution that if students are going to be following teachers or staff on a social media platform, that staff member have a professional account that they can use for students to follow them, and then keep their personal account separate, thus sort of eliminating that mark. I know a lot of, almost all of
my teachers in the past, they all have personal Instagrams and personal Facebooks, things like that. But then they also do have ones that they use for their class as well, which the students are welcome to follow. However, maybe if we put that in the procedure, as staff are welcome to have a professional account open to any member of the board, students, etc., where in that account they're professional in what they do and they're aware of how their actions will affect everyone on there, and then keep their personal accounts separate.
We could add that for sure. Yeah, I mean, we talk about the distinction between the personal and professional, and the lines get blurred, to be honest with you. So even if it's a professional account, even if it's a personal account, we expect the same type of. At the end of the day, teachers and I think anyone who works in education, we are modeling good digital citizenship for our students. So even if it's your personal account, I think you should be adhering to certain decorum and certain degree of conduct, I think. But I don't know if the director wanted to add to that.
I was just going to say, well, the one bullet under best practices on page 3 of 5, the last one does say, staff may share and refer back to their professional account. So if a student or a parent did contact through a personal account, they can kind of direct them back. Do you think is that sufficient, do you think? Yeah.
Thank you. Trustee Carabas.
I have a question about my Twitter account. So is it like personal or is it the board? I use it for only when I go to the board, but is it officially a board Twitter account or?
I don't remember your handle. So the only official trustee Twitter account is the chair's, because we actually call it chair_HCDSB, and then we put the banner on it, and depending on who the chair is, that the administrator will move. So we would change. Diane used to have the chair's account, Jane had the chair's account, now Peter has it. So that's the only official one, and only because we've branded it. But that said, I think your Twitter account does, in your bio, explain that you are an Oakville trustee, correct? So you're tweeting as a professional account.
Trustee O'Brien?
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. I'm very new at social media, so I'm nervous about it. I'm glad the chair has his own Twitter account, but say Trustee Carabello puts out a tweet. Does the press have access to that? Can they do something with that? I'm wondering if I start doing that, what will happen?
So yes, the press, so as soon as you are on it, they are following you. So even if you think I have no followers, nobody's going to notice that, they can be watching you and they can be monitoring what you're tweeting without actually following you. So, I'm not sure exactly what your concerns are, but we could probably, I was going to suggest to invite you, we could have an hour session if you want, just to go over some of the basics, and a good way to start, because I was where you are about, I would say, 6 years ago, and I was not interested at all in starting on Twitter, and actually the director can tell you that he was where you are about 5 months ago, and he was a little reluctant, but he got on, and I think if we demystify it for you, and we can, there are ways to handle even criticism, and I know we talked about that at the last, but I think maybe it would be beneficial to have even a one-on-one session, if you're interested. Yeah. Okay. It is. Now, you can delete your tweet if that's what you mean. So if you mean you accidentally tweet something that's inappropriate and you can delete it. And if it's really inappropriate, I would delete it, but it doesn't mean it's gone. Somebody could easily they could take a snapshot of it and then it's there. So you got to be careful, but the press will be, if they see you're on media, they'll be following you for sure. Yes. It's actually, for us, it's a good way to reach our media. We tag them all the time with stories. We will tweet out stories about the board, and we tag the media, and it's like you're sending them a news release through email. It's much quicker, instantaneously. They're picking it up and they're sharing it. So it's a good thing from our perspective. Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
No, you can't. Yes, sorry, trustee.
So, through you, Madam Chair, I was just wondering, so the distinction between personal account and professional account, like, what is the difference? Because I went on social media in September, and it's Vincent Ian Tomasi for trustee. So I'm trustee now. Is that still considered professional, or is it considered personal?
So,
because
because
it
you've
should go back to the
identified,
start, right?
so because you've identified in your bio as a trustee, it's a professional account, right? I mean, but that said, like I said, the lines are blurred. You can many people, many teachers, many staff, many superintendents, many use social media for personal reasons, and even myself, and I'll tweet stuff that has really nothing to do with my job with the board, but that is of interest. But you always see that line that says tweets are my own or the opinions are my own, and at the end of the day, it's just a line. It really doesn't hold a lot of water, because if you were to put something out there that could come back to harm the reputation of the board, it doesn't matter if you say, oh, but that was my personal account. The damage is done, and you're a public figure. And even if you weren't an elected trustee, anybody who works in education, I think we're under the same microscope.
My question then, following question is, so if I tweet support for the teachers at Queen's Park,
yep,
am I in contravention, or should I put a disclaimer saying this is my personal view, my support for the teachers? Or should it be as a trustee? Okay, so
this is to get back. I don't see that as a concern, Vince, because you're not, you are a political figure and you're supporting teachers, and which are part of your constituents. I would see it as a conflict and a bit of where you're going into, if we were in negotiations, say, and that's different, okay? So because now all of a sudden you're the employer, and so the role changes. Now you're the employer, and you're supposed to be protecting the rights of the employer. And so if you go out and you retweet when the teacher, let's suppose this is not going to happen, but they there's labor unrest, and maybe there's a picket line, and you retweet that and in support of it, that becomes a conflict, and that's where there's the distinction. Yeah.
That's what I was going with it. Thank you.
Sorry, Secretary Daly, do you have?
I was just going to say that I think the tricky part is really how people perceive it. So even if you're saying this is my personal opinion, like if I did that, people are going to say, you're the director of the board. So it's really, the fine line is how people perceive it, not necessarily how you're putting it out there in some ways.
Thank you. I think Andrea, I think we may all take you up on a social media 101.
One question.
Oh, sorry, Trustee O'Brien.
My dilemma is this. I believe that the chair is the media spokesperson for the board. As soon as I start putting my opinions out there, all of a sudden, I sort of become that. That's just my fear. I'm just putting it out.
Okay, so in response to that, it would be consistent with any other correspondence. So if there's a decision that's been made by the board, the chair becomes the spokesperson. If it's just, or if it's something that's currently before the board for deliberation, if it's something that's a hot issue in the media and we need to really contain the messaging, it's the chair that becomes the spokesperson. If it's anything else, you are entitled to your opinion as a trustee. It's not, and maybe I need a more specific example, but other than those situations where, there's a decision that's been made, and even then, as long as you tweet out the decision was made at the board tonight that this and this and this, it's an obvious statement. It's not, anybody who watches the YouTube video will know that decision. Anybody who sat here in the gallery will know that decision. So I don't see that as a conflict in any way.
I'll give an example. Trustee Tomasi puts forward a motion that all students in this board will wear uniforms. Trustee O'Brien backs him up on that. The board does not vote on it until next month, but I'm stating my opinion. That's where an area, I may need to get you to help me filter that, but that would be sort of the kind of I'm talking about.
And again, I don't think no decision has been made, and I think it would be okay, and it has been done. It's been done in the past. It's done across other boards where, and it could be for the rationale of gathering input from your constituents. Like, this is what's before the board right now. What do you think about this? Or this is how I feel about it. What do you think about it? You could do that, and it's not going against a decision of the board, and it's not even preempting anything. It's just, it's not, that's why you don't need an official spokesperson. No decision has been made. You don't need, and I think we should probably meet, because depending on what the issue is, you may get some feedback, you may get some, and then you need to be prepared to deal with that. But let's do a 101. Let's do a social media 101.
I just think some kind. So when you do your STEM visit to a school, you're putting it out there because you think it's important, or so there's really nothing innocuous, and people will, if they are following you, because I've got that feedback from people. Hey, you seem to be at a lot of this. What about that? How about this? So you really are kind of expressing a thought or an opinion, no matter what you're putting out there.
Perception.
So I hate to bring this to everybody's attention, but it is 9:59. We will need a motion to extend. Motion to extend the meeting by 30 minutes. Do we have a mover? Trustee Antomasi, seconder. Trustee Carabella. We'll go to a vote. Trustee Shernanta. Trustee Charlevoix.
In favor.
Trustee Duarte.
In favor.
Trustee DeRose.
In favor.
Trustee Murph.
In favor.
Trustee Carabella.
In favor.
Trustee Antomasi.
In favor.
Trustee O'Brien.
In favor.
So motion's passed that we will extend the meeting by 30 minutes. I'm going to move on to item 6.3, Procedure VI-49, Use of School Facilities Election Day. Superintendent Merrick, and just of note, items 6.4 and 6.5 fall in line with the items that were deferred, so they will follow the next policy meeting, so we will deal with them then.
Yes. Yeah. Correct. Yes. It deals with the policies around use of school grounds, which is,
so
there's small changes to it. But
all right, so then we'll 6.3, 6.4, and are deferred. 6.5 is not. Correct? Okay, so we're moving on to 6.5. Sorry, Trustee Carabella, you had a question?
I do. I just wanted to know where the 8.1 went up? Or
It will go under 6.6.
Okay.
And then 6.7, because it's the upcoming agenda, 6.6 will turn to 6.7. Sorry, Secretary Daly, 6.5.
I'm going to suggest in some ways this is a little bit deferred, because we've deferred some policy items, so we'll rewrite the work plan and bring it back next time around, and maybe also there seems to be, maybe it's a conversation we have at the next meeting, some concerns about the number of policies and the pace and being able to deal with them in a kind of a fulsome way, so that's something we can kind of look at with the plan as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we're moving to item 6.6, which is the policy development on optional programs. Trustee Carabella. Sorry, just for a point, for those of you who were unable to actually pull it up, I do have extras of the policy available, if anybody needs it. Trustee Carabella.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. So before the Policy Committee is a discussion item on optional French programming, early French immersion, and extended French. So the purpose is to provide an opportunity for discussion on a newly proposed draft policy for optional French programming. The Halton Catholic District School Board currently only has a procedure for optional French programming, Procedure 6-53, and I'm proposing that good governance implies that every procedure should be aligned closely to a policy. Upon research and attached as well are current policies on French programming at our neighboring Catholic boards for your information and consideration. And the following draft policy has been drafted based on the Procedure 653 from our board and from the information report, item 10.3 of the March 5th, 2019 regular board meeting, and other changes that were put in. This proposed draft policy will be beneficial to Halton Catholic District School Board due to the growing need for optional French programming in our board. The matter is now placed before the Policy Committee for further review and deliberation. So this is prepared by Trustee Tim O'Brien and myself, and we'd be happy to have any questions. If you want to start with that, or I think originally too, just to say that we started with more of a broader idea of optional programming, but that when you write down all the optional programs that our board provides for the achieving of all our students, we found that, and we didn't find an overarching policy like that at other boards, but we did find the French programming, so we're working with that. That's why that is before you.
Does anybody have any questions? I'm sorry, I'm reading, and I apologize. Trustee Dewar.
So, Madam Chair, I did look at this policy. Thank you for sending it to me. And yeah, there are a few comments which I put down here. Question is, how do we go about the process? Do we discuss it now? Do we discuss it offline? Do we put suggestions? Do we come back second time? Do we come back third time? What's the process for a new policy? So just want to clarify that.
So my understanding, and part of the reason why it was originally put in camera is because it's a new program, and for us to work through together, because it's coming forward as trustees, was for us to speak more freely in an in-camera meeting so that we could work through it together. However, it was voted that we actually deal with it in the regular meeting. So I don't feel that I'm, at this point, prepared to fully comment on it, because there's a lot of pieces in research that I would like and ask details in regards to our current programming and what we have. I know myself, I've been trying to get, to do my own homework in it. I'm not sure how other trustees feel, but I think that obviously whenever we can offer any type of optional programming, that is of advantage, and I think that we need to do our due diligence in getting this right out of the gate, and I think that there's lots of pieces of information that we need to get and assistance from staff. I don't know if that answered your question. Trustee Murphy and then Trustee O'Brien.
I would like to know, so once we move from a procedure to a policy, is there an impact on our financial obligations to fund that, or is it specific to how the policy is written? So is there a different legal, if you want to call it that, classification between a procedure and moving that to a policy?
Secretary Daly, can you answer the difference between the procedure versus the...
Well, in my mind, a policy is a guideline. It's a principle. It's a vision of what we want to achieve as a board. The procedure is how we're going to carry it out. It's fairly straightforward. So the policy guides us, but it doesn't deal with how it's done. A procedure provides the details on how something's going to be implemented. So my only comment to the package as it stands right now is I would say it's essentially procedural as opposed to policy. So my suggestion would be through the process that we set what that guiding sort of overall view is, and I would argue we've got a procedure that already operationalizes it currently.
Trustee O'Brien?
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. We wanted this tonight to be a starting point, a discussion for probably another discussion. We really appreciate the input we got from some of the trustees already. It probably is more procedural because it sort of was our starting point to write with. There's procedure already in place. I'm putting it out to you, where do we want to go with the procedure itself? Do we want to make it, how can we tweak it so it's more visionary as opposed to procedural? And also, I believe in the procedure, we already have supplying funding for busing anyway, transportation. So I don't know if there's going to be a big difference in cost in answer to what you said. So we'd like to make a free discussion. We are going to go through your feedback, hopefully look at the video, and we're taking notes as you speak, and I'd just like to open up to you. What any more feedback you want to give tonight would be really appreciated. Thank you.
Trustee Giornata, and then Trustee Dewar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Trustee Carabella, Trustee O'Brien, so what was the catalyst? I guess I'm trying to get into your minds to start to create the policy. Was it because the procedure didn't have a comparison policy, or was there something or some issue that sparked creating this?
Trustee Carabella, can you?
Well, I would say, from my experience, I think, and although this policy is not linked to what happened at St. Matthew's, I found out at that point that procedures things can be changed without us knowing. So sometimes you have policy first and procedures flow from it, and sometimes procedure precedes policy, that you see that you have a procedure in place, but you need a policy to make sure that it's going to be something permanent now too, because it's not an optional program anymore, a pilot program. It was voted on to be a permanent program, and then when I started to research, the other boards had it as well, and even more detailed. I was surprised to see how some of the other boards are very detailed with their procedures in their policy. So, and I've been witnessing too, like we're taking things out of policy into procedure, and then, you know, we don't want to have policies that have, like, so to speak, no teeth. Like, you want to have a policy that that's specific, or that has a permanence to it. Do you want to say anything else?
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair.
You know what? Yeah. So, sorry, Trustee O'Brien. Trustee Dewar was next.
Sorry, Trustee O'Brien. Okay, I was just going to say that I don't see a problem in having a policy. Other boards have the policy, and very much in detail. And I did study the information provided from Toronto District Catholic District School Boards, which is very nice. But again, it's a policy. It's a high-level document, and it just gives you a lot of flexibility for the procedure to address that. So as Director Daly said, yes, this is more of a procedure, which we already have something to cover that. However, there are a few things which we could incorporate in the policy.
I had asked a question to Trustee Carabella and to Trustee O'Brien,
Oh,
and Trustee O'Brien was going to answer me, and
Oh,
then
is it?
got deferred to you. So,
Okay.
can I get Trustee O'Brien's? No
Okay.
disrespect. I just want to hear his answer.
Oh, I'm
Sorry,
sorry.
I thought Trustee Carabella took the question, that's why. Oh, okay, sorry.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Another driving force was a series of questions we got from the parents of French children who wanted more of a robust, they didn't say policy, but more of a robust foundation in the optional French programming. So we thought a policy may be a way to address that. They knew the procedure was in place, but they kept asking more questions, and we tried to incorporate some of their questions into our policy to respond to our ratepayers. Thank you.
Dort, you can finish.
I'm not going to repeat myself, but to continue with the discussion, and I stopped at the procedure and the policy part of it. So yes, if we can rework this to a policy, which is a high-level document. This has got details of how we handle transportation, and the transportation is handled differently. This is a policy for French programming, and it could be a high-level statement saying that transportation would be permitted based on several factors. So just a comment there. Another thing which I just caught on was the acceptance to the program, and it clearly is statistically not correct. As it says here, the acceptance into the program is through lottery, is a family acceptance, and I caught on that very fast. Different boards do it differently, so we may want to think about these statistics and how it's going to apply to that to us. That's one thing which I caught on, and the transportation, again, we need to take another look at it. Sorry, Patrick. Yeah. Okay, again, the transportation should, in my opinion, should not be in this. It should be in a procedure document or captured elsewhere. It talks about siblings not enrolled in the French program. I think when you talk about a French program, it should be specific to one student and not a sibling. Again, that's the procedural part. Again, on your section on page 5, specific to secondary schools, it talks about transportation for students, secondary students in early French immersion in provide busing. Again, it's a procedural part. It should not have been there. Yeah, those are the few comments which I had. And again, you probably need some help from our staff who write policies all the time. Okay, and it's a good start. Thank you.
So we've got Trustee DeRosa and we've got Trustee Murphy.
Just raising up from the weeds a little bit. Are we suggesting here that there is an issue with the alignment of the actual policy itself versus the procedures? And I'm making a general statement. This may be French programming or optional programming may be an example of where, I don't know that for a fact, but where a policy has become not congruent to the actual procedures itself. Is this what the fundamental issue is?
Can I?
Sorry,
Yeah,
Trustee
so if
Carabella,
you're
do you want-
referring to things like that, we added in the family acceptance. That's something new that we saw at another board. So it's here just for debate. It's not it is different from what we have currently in place. And the idea was to put it here for debate, kind of like the uniform thing, see what everyone thinks, what they're hearing from their ratepayers, from parents, and go from there. So.
Trustee Murphy, then Trustee O'Brien.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. So I would like to get an understanding of your vision of the policy? What's the end game? Because I think there is an end game there. So strictly from my opinion, our current program seems a little fragmented in that if I start off early and I want to be in the French program and I win the lottery and I'm in it, then next year I go back in the lottery, maybe I'm out. So, no, you're staying in it? Okay, so you get grandfathered in. Okay, so that's good. So I'm trying to get an overall, I think you have a concept of how you would like to see the program work, and I just wanted to get a sense of that. What is your overall, what's the end game of this optional program?
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. I could tell you what my end game is. End game being the end, and there's steps to the end. I would like every child that wanted to be in French immersion to be in French immersion. That would be my end game, but that's a long way down the road. I know that. So, I hope that answers. But that is the end. Right now, we're just looking kind of at the first base.
So just to clarify that, so the end result is to offer enough programming to expand the program, what we already have, and maybe through attrition get rid of the lottery process, and that preference would be given to children that win the lottery, that their siblings would be allowed into it. That's one of the things that is. The other question is have we gone through, I think maybe one of the things we could do is refer to staff to talk about, some of the wait lists, times, how the process is working, and maybe revisit. I know the St. Matthew's piece was part of it, but see projected where we're at, and where we're going in that sense, and see what we can make changes. I'm just trying to understand it. I think I'm kind of with Trustee Duart, and I think a lot of this is very procedural as opposed to policy. I think we'll need to kind of, it's not a bad thing, but we need to take a step back and make it that umbrella, and then have that procedural part underneath it. Sorry, Trustee Duart?
I would argue along those lines as well. And maybe this is an opportunity, if that's the end game, maybe it's an opportunity to step back, because this study, there have been studies that have been done before, and take a look at the program, and then the policy will follow. I don't know if there's a need to do that.
Trustee Carabell?
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. So I think my end game is that seeing the reports that have been coming to, like realigning the French, extended French, and, with this vision of getting prepared for more equity. There is a general sense of we're hoping the program expands. So it's just, so that parents, we have a program for us that helps guide parents. There's specific procedures, but that we support the strategic plan meeting the needs of all learners, and that optional French language does increase the opportunities of students. And I just think that, I was looking too at our board website for responsibilities of trustees, and it says there to provide programs for all students and establishing and monitoring board policy. And I think this just having a policy on French programming sends a message to our community that we, are serious about French. And I know I hear a lot of people who, put their kids who can choose the public board over our board because of French. So as we grow and as we prepare for expansion of the program, that I hope that we're able to provide that French language for all students.
Trustee O'Brien?
So thank you, Madam Chair. There are a lot of procedural statements in this, but our hope is not so much to get get rid of the ones we have, with the aid of our trustees, to transform those procedural statements into policy statements. There is a bit of a story about the one about the family. There are two cases, and please correct me if I'm wrong, where twins were separated because the one twin won the lottery, the other one didn't. So, in keeping with the whole Catholic focus on the family, to keep families together, we thought a family lottery would be more in keeping with our Catholic tradition than just an individual lottery. So there's a bit of a story behind that. So, yes, it is very procedural, but we'd like to begin to turn it into more policy, and we're looking for you for help.
Trustee Chernoff.
I just have a question. So if we want to move to a future state, we need to know what our current state is now. And I don't have the information, and maybe nobody in the room does, but maybe. The early French immersion, extended French, what is our current state now? We're growing as a board, but not in all areas. Are certain areas growing more than other areas?
I don't know if anybody can answer that question. I think that was one of I think that is actually a valid question, and that is maybe from this is we can ask for staff to kind of report back on us.
Through you, Madam Chair. I mean, certainly, we spent 2 years on early French immersion as well as extended French, so we have a lot of data and a lot of information around that. Currently, we have no wait lists for extended French in all of the sites that we're offering, aside from 7 or 8 students who have options to go to other extended French programs but are choosing not to due to the delay at St. Matthew's and the re-registration that had to take place as a result of that. There is a wait list for early French immersion in Milton. There is no wait list for early French immersion in Georgetown. There is a small wait list in Burlington and in Oakville. So currently our wait lists are in the early French immersion area. Extended French in Georgetown, there doesn't seem to be an interest anymore in Georgetown. We've run the Holy Cross program ended, and we tried to offer the program at different sites, and regardless of where we offered it, there was no interest of more than 10 or 12 students, and that was after appealing to actually the parents and offering them transportation so that the program wouldn't end there. So that's Georgetown. But I'm happy to do a more fulsome report along those lines. We have all of that data and information. And currently, while, God bless you, and while there is certainly transportation conversations that can be had, expansion of the program, of course, is an ideal scenario. We don't have staff. We don't have teachers to deliver the program, so expanding the program at this current time is not feasible. Down the road, I don't know when that will be, and we have a great challenge, especially staffing early French immersion. And I think that's something that isn't considered in the procedure and policy that needs to be discussed. And that hasn't gone away, and it hasn't gotten better. And throughout the course of the school year, there are many weeks and months at a time where children do not have instruction with a qualified French teacher. And that's reflected in their report cards, as well as affects their hours in French when it comes to early French immersion or extended. We always have a new crop of graduates, and it's very promising, but they also have a lot of choice and a lot of different school boards competing for their attention. So we have a lot of things in place, and we're very pleased with the work that we do when it comes to recruiting and with the staff that we do have. But it is something that's very difficult to commit to given the current staffing circumstances. But certainly we're happy to come back with anything that's more detailed than that.
Can I just, sorry, do you mind, or do you want, are you sure? I just, one of your things was you said that, Superintendent Percassin, that there's times where there's no teacher to offer instruction. Do you do statistics on that? Like, do you have anything that you can bring back as part of it? Just because that is one of the things that we hear when we're talking to these parents, right, is that they feel that there is the opportunity to bring in staff. So I think sometimes it's perception versus because not every parent would necessarily know what's happening in each program and where it's offered and what the statistics are. And maybe if we had that piece too, that might be helpful in informing some of this in the policy.
Are you talking about HR statistics insofar as
Well, non-instructional, when you don't have replacement, when you have teachers that are either on short-term, long-term, or off sick, and then you don't have a qualified teacher to come in to teach, and when I say qualified to teach the program in their play.
Oh, I think that definitely it applies to French, but it is supply teachers are a problem in the system, period, whether they're English-speaking or French-speaking. So, in other words, that data is available and it can be provided. Anything else along those lines is something that we have done extensive research on over the past 2 years, and we had the two committees that we looked into, one that was board-struck, one that was previous to that. So we can certainly update that and take a look at that as well.
Trustee Murphy and then Trustee O'Brien.
Thank you. If I can just get, an opinion. Currently there's 2 new elementary French schools under construction in Milton, one Catholic and one public. So is there, in your opinion, is there a move away from immersion into full-time? I guess it would be hard for you to know the statistics, but where is their growth coming from? And is an immersion-type program something that may decline because people are opting for full-time French instruction?
Through you, Madam Chair, one of the opportunities we've had is to observe what happens in an English-speaking board when they have open access to French, and that is the displacement of the regular track students having to move out of their home school area and go to another school because the whole school has become French. Halton District's answer to that was to begin French 100%, mathematics included, in grade 2, and I believe that has reduced interest to a certain degree at their site. Insofar as French schools are concerned, one of the parents has to be French-speaking. Now, I noticed that the French boards, some of the conversations I've had with people in French boards, is that the secondary French schools are inviting immersion students who do not have a French-speaking parent to come to their Catholic schools. And we all know that certainly when I started as a teacher, the French board was part of our board. And so we were all one board together. So having said that, they haven't relaxed that for elementary. It's a vice versa. It's a vice versa situation. We also get students from the French schools coming to our schools as well. At St. Bridget, it was a regular practice for the students down the road to come down to our school for extended French, where they really excelled, rather than in the French school, so when it would become difficult. Insofar as, the statistics of how many of our students, including those waitlisted, as a percentage, you're looking at approximately less than 3% of our student body is interested in either extended French or early French immersion. And so I think it's our focus has always been to maintain that lens, that we are an English-speaking board offering optional French programs, and we want to emphasize that we're emphasizing functional proficiency and not bilingualism, whereas the French schools are offering bilingualism, which is a very different course. And so the argument from a curriculum perspective is that we want to ensure that we are offering quality instruction in those optional French programs. Toronto Catholic, a lot of the different boards that are here have different models. They offer core for less time earlier. A lot of the things that the larger boards, when you've got 122,000 students, when you've got X number of schools, prorated, we're offering probably as much optional French programming in Halton Catholic as they are in those other boards as well. And so I think that, I don't want to take up a lot of your time. This is all...
We actually have to, we have to extend the meeting. I'm sorry. At first I was trying to be polite, and I was like, I'll let her finish because she's wrapping up, but... So it is 10:31, so we need, I believe, a unanimous vote to extend the meeting. Do we have a motion to extend the meeting by 30 minutes? Trustee O'Brien, do we have a seconder? Trustee Carabella. We will go to a recorded vote. Trustee Chernota. Trustee Charlevoix.
not like I really need sleep, so in favor.
Trustee Duart. Trustee DeRosa.
Why not? In favor.
Trustee Murphy.
I'm enthusiastic for the next half hour, so I'm in favor.
We maybe should record this one. Trustee Carabello.
In favor.
Trustee Intima.
In favor.
Trustee O'Brien.
In favor.
Okay, motion passed to continue on. I'm not sure if Superintendent Percassin was finished. You're done now on that? You ended on that note?
I'm very disappointed it was unanimous.
Yeah. Trustee Duart.
Okay, I just want to point out attention to one notable item here under Principles, page 2, and this is a good part of the policy, if at all. If a change is to occur in a programmed location, parents will be given 1 academic year notice. And I know why it's come here is because of the issues we had in the past. But I'm just wondering, we talked about this statement going into some communication policy somewhere. Is it implemented, is it captured, or is it to be captured?
I think Andrea just captured that in her communication piece with the stakeholders, and I'm assuming that something procedural will come out of that. That's one of the motions, the discussion pieces that was just put on the table.
It could be procedural. What the policy says around changes to programs, I'm just going to pull it again so I can say, it said decisions that directly impact on, no, that's not it, hang on a second. Stakeholders directly impacted by potential changes to existing programs will be notified that the program is under review and will be provided with pertinent information as it becomes available and prior to decision being made. So it doesn't stipulate a time frame. So, I mean, is that something that can go to a procedure? Yes, because this is a policy.
So the distinct difference I see in that policy, and it might not capture it that way, is that it says that before a decision is made, it goes out to the stakeholder, whereas with the St. Matthews piece, it kind of...
I think the distinction is let them know we're reviewing it. Like, we are looking at this right now, and this may or may not happen, but just so you know, we're currently reviewing this. Because they did have advance notice. They were told before it wasn't going to be implemented until next year, so that the advance notice was in place. It's just they didn't know it was coming. They didn't know it was under review.
Madam Chair, I just want to make sure we do not go through the same cycle again. So let's be clear about it and say 1 year notice to be given. Not that we are looking at it, but we have decided and we are giving you a year's notice. That's what is my opinion.
Okay. So, Trustee Murphy, Trustee Carabello, Trustee O'Brien.
My only concern with the trustee stipulating that you need 1 year, maybe it's not possible, depending on the particulars of what the case may be. I think we need to rely on staff to let us know what those parameters would be.
Trustee Carabello, then Trustee O'Brien, then Trustee Duart, and then I'd like to put my...
Well, I don't think everything that's procedural, there can be things that are procedural that are left in the policy, precisely that it comes to us as trustees and we get aware of it. Because what had happened was things were changed in the procedures and it wasn't clear to the trustees. So when we can put specific things in policies, and I think that's what helps parents when it is specific and it is in a policy, and it won't get changed unless it comes to a vote, or if it's a big important thing comes to a vote. I think it gives parents a sense of like safety, security around knowing that they would have a year to prepare.
Secretary Daly, did you have a response to that? I'm sorry.
I just wanted to clarify. It's the second time it's been mentioned that procedures are just changed and not brought to the board. Changes to procedure are brought to board.
Trustee O'Brien.
Okay, thank you to you, Madam Chair, and in response to Superintendent Percassin. We're fully aware of the lack of French teachers, that it is probably a crisis in our province, not just our board, but public boards, everybody. Our goal is not to put burdens on HR, or to put on the French programming. Our goal is to have just a starting point and the policy would be the starting point from which we can kind of focus all French decisions around, instead of it just being the procedure. So, yes, it is our end game, but our end game is way at the end. Right now we just want a policy so that we have actually something that we can speak to our ratepayers from.
Trustee Duarte.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just responding to Trustee Murphy, and I don't want to contradict him unnecessarily. So I just want to reiterate that we discussed this in the past about having this 1 year, and it's not to step on the toes of administration. It's giving them, once it's in the policy, they know well in advance we need to give 1 year notice. We are not dictating to them. It's just that I don't want to go through this exercise again with parents coming and delegating. We all should be clear about it. It's in the policy and our procedure somewhere, and everybody's happy with that. There's no two ways. It's black and white. It's clear.
I put myself on the list next, so I'm good. In one part I wanted to raise 2 points actually, is the relocation of current programs must include consultation with communities being affected. I think if we start getting into consultation for every time we move a program, that it's going to become, we could actually delay expansion of programs. So I think we need to take that into consideration, and that's not a requirement, right? And in talking with some of these parents that have sparked some of this policy, they don't have issue in the programs be relocated. They want the programs offered, and they'll take it where they can get it. It is exactly what their spokesperson said. So, and I think that that's something that we should look at. The other part of it was, to the extent possible, ensure that the FI and EF programs are regionally centrally located in schools that can accommodate the program over the long term, minimizing, if not eliminating, any future locations. Again, I think that's already how the board operates it operationally, right? It doesn't make sense to be transporting everybody from the west end to the east end. There's always that in mind. I just think because there's so much in here, I think we need to, going back to my original thing, which is we need to scale it back a little bit to be more of an umbrella policy. I'm not saying that it shouldn't be a policy. I'm saying have a policy, but scale it back so that it doesn't hold us, and it does the purpose of what a policy is supposed to do. Is it's supposed to leave room so that you can create a procedure out of that, and that it's a governing piece. Trustee O'Brien.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. I agree with you. However, if we take out one of these procedural statements, we'd like it replaced by a policy statement, and we could even talk about that. Like a concrete example is the lottery. If we take out the fact that there is a lottery, leave it in procedure, fine. But what policy statement can we put in there? Like my question is, a lottery itself, how equitable is a lottery? That means my child's education, it all depends on the role of a dice. And I just wonder about the principle behind that choice. So I don't know what other choice there is, but I think we need at least a statement to replace that if we take it out. Thank you. And I'd be anxious to see what you would want to come up with, what kind of statement we could put in.
I believe Secretary Daly had. In regards to the lottery piece, maybe that is something procedurally we need to look at anyways, and just going on Superintendent Percassen, the statistics that you gave in regards to the wait list, if they are that minimal, maybe this is our opportunity to revisit the lottery system and to see if there is a better system that can be put into place, right? So I think that's why it'll be so important for us to actually get information from the superintendents, like that, to come back with reports and to discuss it. Did I misquote you because you said some of them have minimal?
Yeah, I just wanted to indicate extended French, not early French immersion. Early French immersion still has wait lists in Milton, Oakville, and Burlington. Right, just extended does not.
Okay, so I had down that you had a small wait list for Burlington, Oakville, and Milton, none in Georgetown.
For early French immersion?
Yes.
And for extended French, overall, very minimal wait list.
Yes.
Usually the students get in.
Yes.
But
Yeah,
if
that's,
you're one of those 53 people that aren't in an early French immersion class in Milton, that's considered extensive to you if you're on it, you know. So I don't know, I think the lottery system is something that we adopted over a series of investigations and years of trying to find something that would be fair. I don't know what we would do differently for early French immersion because it's still limited in space and in the number of students that we can accommodate in primary with 23.
Well, kind of the predecessor in some boards to the lottery system was first come, first serve. So people were showing up at schools 14 hours before registration opened, and I'm not kidding, literally sleeping overnight to get there first. It's not like, unlike buying a house in Milton now, right? You line up at Mattamy before. It was to make it more equitable, and I mean, we've audited how we run our lotteries, so it's all above board. It was really, that was the move to the lottery system. It's still chance, but I think it's when you have, if you do have more people applying than you have spots, if that's the situation you're in, I think we came to the determination that that was the fairest way to do it, even if it seems like.
Can I respond to that? That is true in a sense. There is another kind of psychology around lotteries, though. I might play a lottery just so I'm in the game, not necessarily wanting to be in to say yes. But if you throw a lottery chance to me, I would want to just play just so I can change my mind later. So I'm not sure if I mean we can talk about the lottery, but I'm not that keen on it anyway. I think it produces another kind of psychological choice when you actually enter into it. The parents at least sleep it out. At least you know they want to be in the program. People who play in the lottery, I'm not so sure they totally want to be in the program. They just don't want to be left out of the program. That's the kind of a psychology I'm talking about. I don't want to get too much into that, but if we took that out, what policy statement could we put in here? Like, I'm looking for something concrete to put down in place of we're having a lottery. Can we say something it would be as equitable as we possibly can make it? Like, I'm open to suggestions here.
So as this is an information item, does this get moved then to it? Sorry, Trustee Chernow.
I just had a question, and maybe Superintendent Prokazin can answer that. In regards to Trustee O'Brien's question, do we have a lot of that where someone puts their name in the lottery and they get a spot and then they say no thank you?
People do change their minds, but it's very minimal, especially in early French immersion. Very rarely change their minds in early French immersion. Actually, we just go next on the list on the wait list. Like, you know, you just keep going down the wait list. So the first come, first served, having been a principal at St. Gabriel at the time when extended French was the only place in Burlington that offered extended French. People were camped out at 3 a.m. in the morning, and it was a routine. By the time I left, within 5 years, that had changed significantly. There was no need for people to wait. Within 5 years, we could barely get 25 to get the class going. So things change over time. They're back to 2 classes now at St. Gabriel, so things change over time.
So back to my question, maybe we can help. So it's here as an information item. Do we bring it back as a discussion item then? With further reports back from staff? I think for me, and I can't speak for anybody else, I think I have a better understanding and a better sense of what the end game is and the end result is that what you're looking for. I think I can look at it in a different light now. Anybody else for comment? Or?
I think we would have to make a motion to get a staff report, however we do that, to bring back for another discussion about the same issue.
And maybe with the wait lists. Trustee Antomas.
Through you, Madam Chair. So we started with a policy, which really we should have started with a motion, send it down, and all of this vetting would have been done for us, and then the decision that would have been before us would have been the end trying to get to the end result. Open, so that it would be open to everybody, but I don't think we have the numbers to do that, right?
I believe there was a motion. If I'm correct, did I got, no?
From the last policy meeting, we agreed to get it to this point, that we would come back for another discussion from the first time I brought it up. And following the flow chart that we were provided, so there's 3 ways to get a policy going. And one is a motion of the board, or a legislation, or referral to the board. Right, Andrea? So there could be a way that either you bring it as a notice of motion and we get a vote and then it comes here, or this is the discussion way where we're all involved and just trying to put something together, and it goes through various drafts, and then at some point there's a vote, a motion. Do we want to go forward and make a policy? And then it would go to the, I think, in the past, also staff has a look at it too, so it's not just, staff has a vision also and has input and has things they want to say directly to it as well, and then it would get voted to go to a policy meeting as a information item or an action item.
I don't think it doesn't go as an action item until it comes for information. Sorry, is somebody?
I might be able to help a little bit. So it can stay in here as discussion as long as you want, and then once the final version is determined, it would become an action item in policy. For first reading at board, go to stakeholder. For input, come back to policy, and then go to board for second and third reading, and then it's in place. So it can stay here as long as you need it to keep talking about it. I would recommend that you look at how long of a list you got for May already, and June is fairly long as well because we've had to defer a few policies as well, so it's getting...
You mean we don't want more 11 o'clock meetings?
Well, I can stay as long as you want. I just live 10 minutes down the road, but...
Can I ask a question, Trustee O'Brien and Trustee Carabella? Have you had any input from staff on this? So is that maybe something we could ask and bring it back as a discussion, give it to staff to kind of have a look at and see how it fits in with the current practice and get their feedback? And then it come back as a discussion item again at the next policy meeting, and then it gives us a better chance too, now that we know what you're looking at, to comment. Trustee Carabell?
I don't know what you're going to say, Trustee O'Brien. I don't know, but I'm thinking that it's still, we can listen to what was said here to make it a bit more overarching, and maybe come back with something that's more lean. And start with that.
I was going to propose that Trustee Carabell and I take your advice to change the procedural part of it to try to make the policy statements, bring it back to you first, and then see what you have to say about that. That's my proposal.
Sorry, Secretary Dale?
For what it's worth, in my limited experience here with trustees developing policy, I think it's problematic to have staff come in at the end as opposed to the beginning, because my prediction is that the end policy will be difficult to understand and even harder to implement, and that's not a reflection on Trustees Carabella or O'Brien.
Could it be done simultaneously? I don't know what the harm would be in us coming back with feedback and staff coming back with feedback, and it being a joint effort. And this way, we're alleviating any issues.
I'm open to that.
So then do we move it? I guess we move it or I don't think we move it. I said that it'll stay on as a discussion or an information item, and that we'll ask that staff offer feedback in it as well, and we'll look at it from a trying to, I guess, make it more into a policy as opposed to procedural. Okay, is everybody good with that? Okay. Okay, awesome. So it'll stay on for the next agenda.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Trustee Antomas.
Policies always have a procedure in order to implement.
We already have it. We already have a procedure, though. There is already a procedure on optional.
But this is a new policy. It has to be weaved into that procedure, right? Because the mechanics are different.
And I think that's why we want staff's feedback on it as well, right? Is the moving parts, is the existing programs and how it works, and how will this policy come into effect? So are we okay with that, though? Trustee Antomasi, does that make sense?
Only one vote.
But it's not about voting. It's about having the staff feedback in regards to the policy.
I would have done it differently. I would have introduced it as a motion, send it down to staff. They write policy, then it comes back up to us, and then we deal with it, and we can wordsmith it. We're starting at the top, and we're trying to go down and see how it's all going to fit. We're not following any procedures.
So are we suggesting then that instead of doing it this way, and maybe we'll put it back to trustee?
It's not my item.
It's not your item. It's Trustee Carabella and Trustee O'Brien's. But that being said, in your opinion, would that be a different way of approaching it? Is that we ask the staff to write the policy, knowing now how it is, and then we have it reviewed?
Are we actually suggesting that the policy gets wordsmithed in this room by this board?
Secretary Daly?
Well, I think ultimately any time a policy comes to the board, I mean, even the ones we suggest now, you either say yes, no, or could we change this, or we don't agree with this part?
But it comes to us in some form of draft form.
Right, yeah.
We don't start writing it from scratch.
Except for Trustee Carabella and Trustee O'Brien took it upon themselves and to actually bring forward a policy. So they started that process as opposed to doing it the way Trustee Antomasi has said. So we've already got the framework. I think it's actually might even be counterproductive to now say staff rewrite it, as opposed to saying how about staff weighs in on it and offers their advice in regards to it and how it will work and how they see it faring with the procedures that are already in effect, because the procedure already exists. The policy may not, but the procedure does. So it has to come in line with what we already have. So
the procedure is going to change on this because the mechanics will be different.
Whatever happens with it, but we're kind of putting the cart before the horse. Let's create the policy, and then and make sure that the procedure follows, that everything falls in line. Trustee O'Brien.
Thank you through you to Madam Chair. Trustee Antomasi, I hear you completely. That is very, very much the way that policy is written. I did check it out with another board. I did contact Hamilton Catholic, and I asked them if that ever does happen. He said it's rare, but sometimes trustees do initiate policy and develop it. But it is rare, so... but I'm willing to do it either way. If you want to do it that way, we can do it that way too.
Going forward, we've already done this, just go forward with it, and if staff can look at it and give input, that's helpful. That's good.
Trustee Chernow.
Through you, Madam Chair, I agree with Trustee Intomasi. I think the staff should write the policy. They're here in the room. We've discussed what this looks like with the draft. I think they should create the policy, attach the procedure, and then we as trustees, like we're used to, will go and take a look and see if it matches our vision at the same time.
Trustee O'Brien?
I did ask some other trustees...
Sorry, and just keep in mind, we have 4 minutes.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. I did ask some of the other former trustees, and there was one policy, actually two, on strategic planning and executive compensation. the original executive compensation. Staff did not come in to executive compensation until later on in the game, and it was pretty much written by one trustee, for the record. But it was a rare incident, so I agree that this is a digression from the norm.
So we've got two options here. Is one is that we work together, or two is we ask staff to come back with something based on the framework and then our discussions here, and then we keep it on as a discussion item for our next policy meeting. Are we all okay with that? I don't know that we need to vote on that. I think it's because it's still an information item. So is that the consensus then? Yes? Okay. So then we'll, Secretary Daly, if we can ask that staff create the policy based on our discussions here tonight and come back at the next policy meeting.
Reallocated the French programs in the fall. We tried to line them up with their secondary schools. We tried to keep in mind family schools. Like, some of those principles are the ones that were in our board report. So if that's the overarching, when we're making decisions about French programming, this is our policy, this is how we're going to base our decisions, then I don't think that's a difficult task to do. And certainly if there's something missing, or there's something that the board feels they need more of, then that's up to you.
Thank you. Okay, so that being said, items 6.7 down are for your review, upcoming agenda items for the May 14th meeting. I'm not going to read through them. They're all there. We have 2 minutes. And we will have some deferred items, and it looks like we'll also have this back on the table for discussion as well. There's no miscellaneous items under item 7. Item 8, no in-camera. Point 9, motion to excuse absent committee members. Can I have a motion to excuse Trustee Agnew, Trustee Duart, seconded by Trustee Zernota? And do I have a motion to adjourn? Trustee Carabella, Trustee O'Brien. And I believe Trustee Antomasi, could you lead us in our closing prayer?
In the name of the Father, name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you, Lord, for your presence with us this evening. As we depart from this meeting now, we ask you to bless us through the remainder of this night and guide us safely home. Do not let the learning and the conversations of this gathering die, but instead may they continue to ruminate within us, so that we may bear the fruit of this table throughout the year. We ask this in the name of Jesus and in the power of the Holy Spirit. Amen.